What do you think is proof that we live in a simulation? I don't know if this is just me, but I often have a boring dream of myself in a classroom or on a bus, wake up and forget it pretty quickly. Then, many years later, I'm on a bus or in a classroom, and I see something or hear something that I saw or heard in that dream. Then I suddenly remember that dream and I get really confused. It's happened about 10 times in my life so far. I know the exact moment that I would call BS on reality. I was out for supper with my mother, grandmother, and sister, and after we'd mostly finished eating, there was a moment where my sister and I, across from one another, witnessed the same thing. It was a mundane dinner and mundane conversation, yet a moment occurred that would shock my sister and I. While my mother and grandmother were talking, there was an instance where a white plate between my sister and I shook on the table. It had been clean previously, but post-table shake, a solitary French fry appeared on that plate. At first I thought I was the only person witnessing this bizarre reappearing act, however post-appearing, I locked eyes with my sister who had seen the same thing. We still talk about that stupid frickin' fry to this day. Why physics appears to operate under different rules depending on whether you're looking at very big things or very small things. If it's a simulation, they simply faked the big things to save processing power, which is why quantum physics doesn't fit neatly in our understanding of the universe and likely why we're detecting dark matter. When your pen gets lost as soon as it hits the floor, and then reappears right there after some time. In college, I couldn't find my favorite lipstick. It usually lived on my dresser, which admittedly also had a bunch of other crap on it at that point. So I took everything off the dresser, item by item, and moved it to my bed as I looked for the missing tube of lipstick. It wasn't there. Put everything back on the dresser, item by item, and then left the room. Came back a little while later, and the lipstick was sitting by itself right by the edge. Yeah, the physics engine and pop-in of some of the items in our world really does seem to go haywire between the different patches we get for the great computer game that we call life, doesn't it? In seriousness, I think there's a non-zero chance that someone borrowed your lipstick. Well, yesterday, while driving with my daughter in the car, she says, "Dad, I'm starting to feel that this whole human thing isn't real." So I guess that would be confirmed as my first hint. Wait, round about how old is she where she's already either having an existential crisis or contacting the devs? Sometimes you get out of your house and walk past the same people a lot of times. Like you're going to the market and walk past a dude walking the opposite direction. Then you leave the market a couple of minutes and walk past the same guy again in the opposite direction. This crap happens a lot with me, and it's like a ton of people at the same time. It makes me feel like there aren't enough models of NPCs to throw around, so the Matrix just uses a bunch of the same people. You could say the strict laws of physics that govern our reality. If we were in, say, a video game, we'd eventually start wondering why the rules seem absolutely rigid and mathematical. Maybe the speed of light is just the speed limit for transmitting information within the network of our simulation. Also, there seems to be limited resolution due to Planck's constant. Our graphics card must be frickin' insane though. Our render distance is essentially infinite. The quantum eraser. Quantum physics as a whole feels like a huge developer shortcut. Things only exist in a definitive state when they're interacted with. Kind of like a graphics card only rendering things when your character is looking at them. When you run into someone you don't know and you both just stare at each other thinking, "You look familiar, do I know you?" And then ask a million questions trying to figure it out and come to the conclusion that you don't in fact know each other. Then you walk away still wondering why that person looked so familiar. So, at my first job after college, I ran into this guy in the smoking area and he said, "Hey, how's it going?" I knew him right off the bat, but I'm absolutely horrible with names. Plus, I couldn't quite place him. Did I know him from high school? College? Friend of a friend? Academic conference? Someone I interviewed for the paper? So I talked with him for a few minutes, waiting for the guy to drop some sort of hint to trigger my memory. Finally, he looks me straight in the eye and says, "You don't remember me, do you?" And I was so embarrassed, but I freely admitted it and asked him to remind me. He gets this stunned look and says, "Oh crap, really? Because I've been waiting for you to say something to remind me. We've known each other 22 years and have been a couple for 20 years, and been married for 12 years. We still don't know when we met the first time. We have a couple of guesses, but don't know for sure. The weird part is that we figured out that there were multiple times we should have met, but didn't. We knew a lot of the same people, but at different times. The guy I went to college with was someone he knew in junior high. His best friend's girlfriend shared a high school class with me. I was acquaintances with a girl he dated just before he enlisted in the Navy, which was right about the time I moved into the area. The oddest one was that we should have met as young kids. We should have met when I was in first grade and he was third grade, because we both qualified for an enrichment program that year. But my family was going to move later that year, so my parents kept me out. So yeah, we know the second time we met, but not the first, and should have met earlier, but kept missing. Déjà vu. It's similar to déjà vu, but it's where you've dreamt of a future moment. It's weird, and for me it hasn't been useful. But one moment I'll be experiencing life and just know what's going to happen because I saw it in a dream. I'll even know about my futile attempts to change it from the dream. It only lasts a couple of minutes at most, and it's mundane moments, but it is freaky. Before cell phones, I accidentally misdialed a person's number and got the correct person at somebody else's house, with the wrong number being 3 numbers off. I talked to her for about a minute, and she asked me how I got her uncle's number. I said I didn't have his number, I dialed hers, and we both fell deadly silent thinking about how bizarre it was. The observer effect in quantum mechanics. When something is in multiple states at the same time, and when you measure or watch it, you force it into a state. It just looks like a computer saving resources by not loading useless crap. I get that there's probably something behind it, and it's not actually the fact that we're watching it that does something, but if tomorrow we were able to prove that we live in a simulation, then this would have been a hint. That thing where you go into a room for something and then forget why. Like a sim who had their action cancelled. That can't be for no reason. That was someone in our simulation cancelling our action. I mean, my explanation for this has always just been that I'm a dum-dum, but if you think that your brain is unassailable and would rather literally find any other explanation for an attack of the stupids, be my guest. The following commenter has a suggestion. That's actually because your brain compartmentalized thoughts based on location. New room equals new train of thought equals what the heck did I walk into this room for? I don't think we should be answering this question. It's clearly a bug survey. Nice try, simulation developers. Dreaming. How it could be a gateway to another universe or version of yourself, and how do we manage to forget those dreams, especially the important ones. In high school, I downloaded an app that would wake you up when you were dreaming so you could write them down while they're fresh in your memory. After a few months, I lost that phone and forgot about the app. I recently downloaded the app to find out that all of the stories were kept through my account. I couldn't have told you a single dream I wrote down in there because I completely forgot. But the moment I read my own stories, written in a groggy, barely awake grammar, I was immediately teleported into the exact scenarios of the dreams. I could all of a sudden vividly picture the smallest detail of the dream simply after reading a few words. It was wild. Often when I learn about something new that I've never heard about, all of a sudden it starts appearing randomly in some TV show I'm watching or a news or Reddit article. They should really fix the targeted ad algorithms to make it less obvious that I'm living in a simulation. Gotta say, the karma system for real life is broken as frick. I think the clearest sign is the need to sleep. Gotta reset the system or it slows down, has glitches and deteriorates because it can't clear out the useless junk and it runs out of space. Extreme synchronicity. People write it off as coincidences, but I sometimes don't. Some people get sick for no reason, and some people who should be sick because of how they live seem super healthy. Millions of years of evolution and we can still accidentally bite our own tongue? That's some bullcrap, man. Black holes could be a glitch. Black holes are the deletion program of the simulation. Periods. Let's leave a trail of blood for predators to follow at the same time that I'm curling up into a fetal position from cramps. Super suspicious. Sounds like it was made by the same people who put Sims in a pool and removed the ladder so that they drown. Children who are convinced that they've lived before and know sometimes verifiable facts about the person they think they were. The Joule slit experiment. Basically, light acts like a wave when you look at it. But if you look really closely at light, you see it's not a continuous wave, but made of teeny tiny particles called photons. These photons, when there's loads of them, affect each other so that they act in waves. Seems simple. However, when you fire photons one at a time at a piece of card with 2 slits in it, they still act like they're being affected by lots of other photons around them. So whoever designed our simulation wanted to model light using waves, but it was too complex, so they made photons instead. The same way a curve in a video game is actually made of square pixels. They never figured we'd get smart enough to experiment on individual pixels. As Neil deGrasse Tyson likes to say, if we ever discover that we can simulate the universe, then we're more likely than not living in a simulation ourselves. My wife. How can someone be absolutely perfect for me and I met her by mere coincidence? The fact that the moon and the sun can just about perfectly eclipse each other. What are the odds that the moon and the sun would be the sizes they are and distances from the Earth that they are to allow that to happen? You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Being depressed despite any reason. I have a perfect family, I'm annoyingly optimistic, I do everything, and yet here I am. It's like someone is just pushing the be more sad button for craps and giggles. The Gates of Hell. It's a crater that's been burning for over 40 years straight. I'm pretty sure it has something to do with it being in a desert and surrounded by gases, but the fact that it's been like that for more than 40 years is insane. There's also Centralia, Pennsylvania, a town where they accidentally lit underground coal seams on fire, and the entire town had to be condemned because it turned the air toxic, and streets would collapse with no warning, and fire would just erupt from the ground unpredictably. It's supposedly going to burn for at least another 250 years. Like, come on. The devs weren't exactly subtle with that one. Collapsing ground, spouts of fire, poison gas clouds, that's literally a generic video game level. Look around the room that you're in. Choose any random object within the room. What does it feel like to lick that object? You know what it feels like to have licked it, but have you ever? Single biggest glitch in my book. I'm pretty sure I actually have licked most of them. Whenever you're driving down a straight road on a hot day and it has a road mirage that looks like parts of the road haven't rendered yet. Appendixes. Screw those things. Haven't they discovered that it's necessary now? The farm for your gut bacteria? Okay, I'm learning that it's not necessary, but it might be beneficial. The reason it could be beneficial is up for some debate. Constant speed of light. Quantized space, time, and energy. Slowing down time as speed increases. No information out of event horizons. Increasing quantization at higher energy levels. I'm convinced we're in a simulation already. The year 2020. From start to finish. There's no way that this isn't someone testing mods and messing with us all. Somebody's playing Plague Incorporated with our lives. As an aside, the narrator has been considering buying that game. Anyone able to testify whether it's any good? Maybe I can see if the little people react as stupidly as the rest of us did during the pandemic. Every field of study, including science, runs on assumptions that we can't prove, and no matter how much research we do, we end up with loose ends. For example, we can't prove that the laws of physics have always been the same. We just have to assume that they've always been that way when we run our models. My buddy, who just finished a PhD in material science, likes to say that when you go deep enough into research, you find out that everything we do, all the structures and theories and everything else, is resting on clouds of uncertainty. The Bermuda Triangle. Why has everyone disappeared there? Literally some of the busiest shipping lanes in the world with thousands more pleasure craft, commercial trawlers, and private and commercial flights traverse the area routinely, but yeah, sure, everyone disappears there. When street lights shine through leaves, the shadows on the grounds are perfect grid patterns, like poorly rendered shading effects. The Mandela effect, a phenomenon where a large group of people share the same false memory of an event or detail. This collective misremembering often involves specific, vivid details that contradict documented reality. The term was coined after many people recalled Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s, despite his actual death in 2013. The idea or concept of needing to prove our self-worth. Why do people have to prove their self-worth in the world? Isn't it enough just to exist? It's a strange phenomenon. It fuels a lot of chaos that has existed or is existing in the world, and it makes absolutely no sense. Missing items like keys or tools. Those things you're positive are there, but aren't when you look, and then reappear after you go back to look. Character glitches, also known as seizures. Murphy's Law. Everything that can go wrong will go wrong, but it only applies when you think about it before doing a thing. It's like a secret cheat code in a game, except it's the opposite. Chameleons. Way too many plot holes there. If they can change color, how do we know that they're green? What's up with their tiny little hands? And don't even get me started on their nightmare tongues. Putting something in one spot, going to get it and it's not there, fast forward days, weeks or hours, and now it's there again. I don't know about you guys, but this happens to me a lot. I don't think that I'm that scatterbrained because I specifically remember putting, say, my glasses on the bedside table. Then they aren't there, I go look all over the house, come back into the bedroom, and there they are, on the bedside table. Abraham Lincoln was elected to Congress in 1846. John F. Kennedy was elected to Congress in 1946. Abraham Lincoln was elected president in 1860. John F. Kennedy was elected president in 1960. The names Lincoln and Kennedy each contain 7 letters. Both were particularly concerned with civil rights. Both wives lost their children while living in the White House. Both presidents were shot on a Friday. Both were shot in the head. Kennedy's secretary, last name Lincoln, warned him not to go to Dallas. Both were assassinated by Southerners. Both were succeeded by Southerners. Both successors were named Johnson. Andrew Johnson, who succeeded Lincoln, was born in 1808, and Lyndon Johnson, who succeeded Kennedy, was born in 1908. John Wilkes Booth was born in 1839, and Lee Harvey Oswald was born in 1939. Both assassins were known by their 3 names. Both names are comprised of 15 letters. Booth ran from the theater and was caught in a warehouse. Oswald ran from a warehouse and was caught in a theater. Booth and Oswald were both assassinated before their trials. Fog is just a draw distance limitation when the majority of memory is being used elsewhere in the simulation. The speed of light. I mean, a constant? That makes no frickin' sense, and honestly probably has more to do with the simulation maximum processing speed. High-pitched ringing in your ears. Or is it just your brain syncing with the cloud? Déjà vu. Any explanation that has been offered sounds a whole lot like science pulling the "that's not a glitch, it's a feature" routine. Black holes are definitely a hole in the map. What's through those things? We haven't got the faintest idea, but once you go through, good luck coming back. Australia. It's the first content of a DLC we never got, and now it just feels off somehow. It was going to be the one you play when you've beaten the rest and are growing bored. The Fermi paradox. The following are some of the facts that together serve to highlight the apparent contradiction. There are billions of stars in the Milky Way similar to the Sun. With high probability, some of these stars have Earth-like planets. Many of these stars, and hence their planets, are much older than the Sun. If the Earth is typical, some may have developed intelligent life long ago. Some of these citizens may have developed interstellar travel, a step humans are investigating now. Even at the slow pace of currently envisioned interstellar travel, the Milky Way galaxy could be completely traversed in a few million years. And since many of the stars similar to the Sun are billions of years older, the Earth should have already been visited by extraterrestrial civilizations, or at least their probes. However, there's no convincing evidence that this has happened. We're in a simulation that more advanced humans are running to see if and how the humans in the simulation, us, find out that they're in a simulation. Then the humans that made our simulation can use that to determine if they are in a simulation, just like deGrasse Tyson said. Simception. Not seeing baby pigeons. Like, where the frick are they at? I'm sad to break it to you, but they exist. And they are ugly as hell. I've had 5 pigeon babies hatch near my balcony. They're nasty. I didn't believe birds were real, but yeah. You know what? The narrator is not at all surprised that the offspring of the most annoying bird to grace my gutters is ugly as hell. Just goes to show that feathered rats have no redeeming features. Nobody likes you, pigeons. I've had some real weird coincidences in my life, like statistically unbelievable. I was born in a really small town and moved 700 miles away when I was 5 years old. I grew up with a girl that was born a day before me in the same hospital, and we didn't realize we were from the same town. My bus driver in middle school was from the county over. I ended up becoming best friends with a guy I skated with in college and high school who randomly dropped our hometown's name. Later on, maybe 12 years later when I was bartending, I was giving a coworker crap for his northern accent, and then he told me our hometown's name again. I ended up doing AmeriCorps or volunteer stuff, and I wanted to go as far away as possible. 17-hour drive over 1,000 miles. Turns out the county name was the same as my birthplace. There's some other stuff with numbers, but it's zip codes and I'm going to keep that private. Doppelgangers. Enough said. I feel like I really need to light up some green herb before reading all of the answers here. The never-ending lightning strikes that keep happening in that one town in Venezuela. They've been going on for centuries. It's called Catatumbo lightning. When you can't sleep at all and you try everything to sleep but seem unable to, then that means that the sleep servers are full and you've got to wait until the servers give you a spot. The platypus. It's just so different than any other animal module. Lucid dreaming. Teachers, what's your "that student definitely isn't going places" moment? As a getting-to-know-you activity, I asked students, if you could be anyone in history, who would you be and why? One student's answer, Eleanor Roosevelt, because I've always wanted to be black. Asked my student, 7th grade life science, why he has Fs in all of his classes and why he doesn't bother to care about it. He proceeds to tell me with the most confident smile that he's making it into the NBA. I assigned students to do a group presentation of a story from mythology at the end of the school year. I told them they could choose from Greek, Roman, Egyptian, Norse, or any other system they chose. 2 students chose a story from Norse mythology about Thor. They presented the story, which included characters like Loki, Captain America, Iron Man, etc., completely seriously. I spoke to them at the end of the class and they had no clue that Marvel Cinematic Universe was not a part of Norse mythology. Used to teach English in Japan. Had a 4-year-old kid who would run at top speed toward the wall, throw himself into it, stumble around going, ouch, for a few seconds, then do it all again, for an hour straight if we would let him. Had a 7-year-old who stripped off down to his underpants, then skipped around the room singing the Pokemon theme song for the whole class. Finally got him dressed up again just as the lesson ended. He looked up at me and said in complete seriousness, Sensei, I did a good job. Had a 12-year-old kid who would take off his socks and chew on his toenails in the middle of my lessons. Kids, man, they're weird. I think, due to the behavior of the 4-year-old, there was a modest to good chance all of these were the same kid. It's not uncommon as a teacher to have students who are a bit behind the curve in certain aspects, but 99.9999% of the time, they are keen on something. They might not understand how to identify a noun or what theme is, but they somehow know how to make a mean plate of nachos. You learn pretty quick not to judge fish for their tree climbing ability, you know? I thought this was the rule when I was teaching until I met Kevin. Kevin isn't his real name, but it doesn't matter because he can't spell it anyway. Kevin was a student of mine during my last year of teaching. He came to my classroom with very little to show for his academic past. He had moved a few times and thus was missing a lot of typical test scores that we used to try and ballpark their ability. Don't worry, it was a ballpark. We didn't make major decisions until we actually had a chance to talk to and work with a student for a bit. I thought, that's fine, I'll just do some one-on-one with Kevin and see what's up. One-on-one with Kevin was like conversing with someone who'd forgotten everything in a freak, if not impossible, amnesia accident. There was no evidence that he had learned anything past the 2nd grade, and now he was in the 9th grade. Flabbergasted, I figured we needed to get more serious with this. If he was going to be in my class, I needed to know why and how. I decided to meet with him, his guidance counselor, his parents, and another teacher to see what was really going on. This is where it all became clear. It was by some incredible fluke that his family hadn't been wiped off the face of the earth years ago. Odds are his entire heritage was based on blind luck and some type of sick divine intervention that saves his family every time a threat presents itself. Kevin was the genetic pinnacle of this null achievement. Even my instructional lead, a woman who could find a redeeming trait in a Balrog, failed to see any reason this kid or his family should be alive today. So here's a list of events that made it abundantly clear that God exists and he's laughing uncontrollably. Kevin frequently forgot when and where class was. On more than one occasion, I had to retrieve him from other classrooms. Kevin ate an entire 24-pack of crayons, puked, and then did it again the next day. This is 9th grade. I have no idea where he got crayons. Kevin's dad wrote tuition checks and mailed them to me, his English teacher. This was a public school. When I gave it back to Kevin, voided, to give to his dad with a brief note explaining that this is a public school, Kevin got in trouble for trying to spend it at a 7-Eleven after school. Kevin was removed from the culinary arts program after leaving a cutting board on the gas stove and starting a fire. Twice. Kevin threw his lunch at the school resource officer and tried to run away. He ran into a door and insisted it wasn't him. Kevin stole my phone during class. I called it. It rang. He denied it was ringing. Not that it wasn't his, not that he did it, no. No, he denied that the phone was actually ringing. He tried 3 times before the end of the year. Kevin called the female basketball coach a mother-flipping B-word during gym. Basketball tryouts were that afternoon. Kevin tried out. It didn't go well. Kevin's mum could never remember which school he went to. She missed several meetings because she drove to other schools. none of which he ever went to. Kevin tased himself in the neck before a football game. Kevin kept a bottle of orange Kool-Aid in his backpack for about 4 months. He thought it would turn into alcohol. He drank it during homeroom and threw up. Kevin said the N-word a lot. Kevin was white. The high school was 84% black. Kevin got beat up a lot. Kevin stole another student's iPhone and tried to sell it back to them. Kevin didn't understand that his grade was dependent on tests, quizzes, homework, classwork, and participation. Kevin finished his first semester with a 3% average. He tried to bribe me with $11. Kevin spit on a girl and said, "You should get out of those wet clothes." The girl was the Spanish student teacher. Kevin didn't know dogs and cats were different animals. Kevin tried to download adult flicks onto a computer in the library, at the circulation desk, while he was logged on. Kevin asked a girl to prom, he was in the 9th grade and freshmen don't go to prom, by asking for her phone number and then texting her his address. Kevin got gum in his hair constantly. Kevin regularly tried to cheat on assignments by knocking the pile over, grabbing one before I had picked them all up, and then writing his name on it wherever there was room. Kevin had several allergies, but neither his parents nor he could remember what they were. They were very concerned that the holiday party, it's high school, we don't have those, would have peanuts. When they finally got a doctor's note, he was allergic to amoxicillin. Kevin and his parents took a trip to Nassau. How the F did they even get airline tickets? And forgot all their luggage at home. I didn't believe him when he told me until I talked to his mum, who told me first thing when I saw her at the bi-weekly meeting. Kevin's grandfather apparently died in a chainsaw accident. I can only assume God was looking the other way that day. Folks, I would be ashamed to tell you how many takes that story took me because I was just laughing so much. Oh, Kevin, I can only hope that your savings of $11 from the rejected bribe afforded you some small comfort in your life after school. In the last few weeks before the AP exam, I gave my classes a series of practice tests, written by College Board, to take in class under a time constraint to give them practice. One student, let's call him Bill, always tried to cheat in my class. I'd gotten sick of putting in the effort to catch him, and it didn't matter because the entire point of the class was to prepare for the AP exam. Bill started off each test by staring at the page and answering 1 or 2 questions. Then, as always, he asked to go to the bathroom during the test. I let him go and he took his phone, of course. He returns and frantically bubbles in the rest of the test and turns it in early. I have to hand it to him. Bill was great at memorizing letters for the answers of the practice tests, but he failed the AP exam. This isn't really the kid's fault, more the parents', but my sister teaches in Hong Kong, generally 3 to 4-year-olds, and she had this one kid, called Enzo, if I remember right, who kept acting out, completely ignoring my sister and her TA when they spoke to him, and doing badly in the classwork they're given. He also didn't speak, at all, tended to play by himself. So my sister called in his parents to discuss it, voiced her concerns that there might be behavioral problems, maybe something deeper seated. His parents then confided in her that it's probably not that, more that the kid didn't speak a lick of English or Cantonese, i.e., the 2 languages used in the school and most of Hong Kong. They were both relatively affluent Italians, so they'd raised the kid speaking Italian and lied that he spoke English fluently so he could get admitted into the school, as it was a requirement that they had to have a basic understanding, if I recall correctly. My sister raised her concerns with the principal after she had the meeting, and they responded by just moving the kid to another class. She said she still sees him sitting alone during lunch breaks. I really feel for the kid though. He's only young, and he's pretty much been alienated and won't learn properly, because his parents are so dead set on shoving him into the most expensive school, assuming that he'll learn well. Not a teacher, but in one of my health and sex ed classes, a girl in my class said she wasn't afraid of getting AIDS, because if she got it, she'd just give it to someone else, and therefore not have it anymore. Yeah, that was an interesting day once we realized she was serious. A university freshman turned in a paper on the Treaty of Versailles that conformed to no known formatting system I had ever seen. There didn't even seem to be paragraphs. Assuming that his computer had jumbled it up somehow when he turned it in, I went to give it back to him in class one day so he could fix it. He informed me it was intentional. The format meant that the paper was meant to be read as a rap, which he proceeded to do for me in the few minutes before class started. It was incredible. D+. I always thought that Lin-Manuel Miranda's Hamilton was truly a musical beyond reproach. I now see that he may have caused some issues in the schooling system. Okay, so I had a student in middle school that couldn't read. That wasn't a huge deal. Kid had issues. Once he got angry at me and told me he was going to rip off my buttons. It may have been literal or figurative. Didn't matter. Remember, issues. It was my job to teach him to read. He should have already been in high school. He was 14 and in middle school. I worked individually with this kid every day. Finally, I just asked him what he was going to do for a living, if he couldn't read and wouldn't try. He gave me a pretty standard answer. I'll play basketball or sell drugs. I should mention that he was barely over 5 foot tall. I worried about him. He was my student for 2 years. Eventually, he moved on and I switched high school. So 20 years later, I got curious. I remember most of my students and this kid had a name that stood out a bit. I Google his name, hoping he won't be in prison. A lot of my former students are. I find him right away. He's a professional basketball player. For Ukraine. Retired now, but still. Good for him. Made himself proud. As a note, he turned 15 in middle school. He did learn how to read, he graduated, and went to college. Apparently he struggled for a while, but he's human. His history was not ideal. I'm concerned about naming him because of his privacy. He played from 2006 to 2010. One of the fellas in my university first-year computer programming class stared at the wall. The same spot. The whole class. Every class. He'd walk in on time, sit down, open his folder, and stare at the wall, and didn't ever take a note that I saw. At the end of the wall-staring duration of the class, he'd close his likely still blank folder, get up, and leave without a word. I see him from time to time at the grocery store, collecting up the carts. I feel a little bad for whoever funded his education, but am pleased that he has a steady job. My 8th grade physical science lab partner took the top off one of those oil burners, poured the oil all over our desk, and then lit it on fire. Like on purpose. Did you think it would be less flammable because it's on the table now? Hilariously, even though I was the one who put the fire out and had nothing to do with lighting it, I still got suspended too. I guess the lesson I was supposed to learn was never help put out a fire. Here's one from my mum. The class ate at one of those medieval-themed restaurants on a field trip, and one little brat took advantage of the setting and the overflowing cleavage. He referred to the waitress as his wench, and demanded that she butter his bread, all so she would bend over to better reveal her bountiful bosom. He ordered the turkey legs, then wielded them theatrically like Henry VIII, while thanking the waitress for giving him a bone. When my mum got home, she said he was a sexual harassment lawsuit waiting to happen. I'm late, but I have a winner. The class was an applied math course for high schoolers, and we held a paper airplane design contest. The rule was that you could use anything on the table to make your airplane, and that the person who threw theirs the furthest down the hallway would win. The table had all manner of things on it: printer paper, construction paper, tape, rulers, compasses, toothpicks, duct tape, paper clips, masking tape, a stapler, and even Elmer's glue. Well, the class went to work and for an hour designed some very interesting airplanes. Except for Tim. Tim sat quietly and chatted with his friends until about 30 seconds were left to build. Then he went up to the table, grabbed a few things, and sat back down to wait. When it came time to throw, it turned out that his airplane was a piece of paper wrapped around the stapler, while the lighter and more complex planes drifted to the side and landed early or hit the hallway walls. Tim's plane slammed straight into the door on the other side of the hall, with a satisfying clunk. Tim's ridiculous creation beat everyone else out and won the contest easily, while technically obeying the rules of the competition. I hope that guy ends up working for NASA. My other favorite student was a kid who ate a glue stick for $5. He figured it was edible because it said non-toxic. Technically correct, but so wrong. He had to go home due to the uncontrollable vomiting. I'm not sure if he was ever paid the $5. My third favorite was a middle schooler whose mum was dissed by another student in class. His reaction, not having any decent weapons on him, was to rip out the 3-ring part of a 3-ring binder and use the prongs to attack the other student's forearm. Unfortunately, that kid isn't going anywhere but juvie unless he can help with his anger issues. Too bad, because it was an ingenious improvised weapon, and he probably could have used that creativity some other way. Kindergarten teacher. Testing students on community helpers, asked a student to name 3 community helpers. Child responds, "Firefighter man." Now I really thought, yes, she's got this in the bag. A hot dog. And a monkey. Yeah, no. Kiss your brain, though. Blatant and low-effort plagiarism. Like it's literally the first Google result if you search topic, example essay. But they add their name in a different font and size, which should make it obvious at a glance, as if the use of capitalization and punctuation wasn't a dead giveaway that they didn't write it. I had a student pull that last year, while his even dumber buddy didn't even put his name in it. In fact, it wasn't even an essay, it was a selection of question prompts. Basically, 2 Kevins in one class. I also had a kid at the very end of the day continually F around with his skateboard and become very hostile when I insisted on holding it until the last bell. He ran out the door, jumped on it, and promptly fell and broke his jaw. His parents then threatened to sue the school because he got hurt there doing something he wasn't supposed to be doing. Oh, this is a great one. Twice this week, the same student brought a popsicle in to have as a snack for lunch. Needless to say, he was very disappointed. His mum might actually pack his lunch. Blatant, low-effort plagiarism is not exclusive to younger students. Look forward to it all the way through university. As for the popsicle kid, that seems like another case of neglectful parenting. Been a history teacher for 3 months and was teaching about the Middle Colonies and how it was the breadbasket of America. The next day as a warm-up, I ask what the breadbasket is. She rose her hand without her even skipping a beat and starts going off about how I'm so dumb because it's called the chicken basket, where you get your tenders, 2 sides, and it also comes with bread, but that isn't what it's called. This poor girl has a lot more stories. This is just the one that stands out to me the most. Other stories include wondering how Obama was the first black president because she also thought Abraham Lincoln was black. Her reasoning behind it all was that he was really, really tall. Granted, she's also black, so yeah. Along with that, I've had to explain that we did have color back then. She couldn't believe that people before the 1950s still had color, as the only TVs and photos were black and white. She constantly calls people cockatoos. 3 weeks ago, she asked which history I'm teaching. I honestly don't know if I really suck as a teacher or if it's her. Mind you guys, I do teach 8th grade US history. I wanted to believe all kids are smart, but I'm just slowly not going to hold on to that belief anymore. These are the highlights. Ask again next year and I'll have stories from multiple kids. I want to reap in that sweet, sweet karma. Not a teacher, but I work as a bouncer, and on Saturday some girl was persistently trying to get into my bar, but looked young and didn't have ID with her. After telling her no about 30 times and her complaining about everyone hating on her, a guy walked in and told us he's one of her high school teachers and that she's 17. She took off awfully quick when he showed up, and I can only imagine how things went in school today. I once had a couple of exchange students steal from my store when I was managing a Lids. They walked out the store and we followed closely after them. We turned the corner and they were stopped talking to their teacher. We patiently waited while they finished talking to the teacher, all while getting strange looks from him. He started to walk away, and we immediately tell the kids we need the hats they stole, to which they replied, "We will give them back, but we can do it somewhere else. That's our teacher." Like I was going to cut them a break after they stole. Teacher notices that there is a problem and comes back and absolutely laid into them, telling them they were going to go to jail and get expelled. We had no intent of pressing charges, they were only around 15 and stole 2 hats. But my God, if that teacher didn't put the fear of God into them. It turns out they were spoiled rich kids from another country who actually had the money to pay, but thought stealing would be cooler. We ended up getting a call from the school. They had to write an apology letter for us, and they had to do 30 hours of volunteer work for the charity of our choice. They threatened to shut down the school's exchange program because of them as well, but I never heard of what came of it after that. Worked with 3-year-olds. One was crying and pointing at another kid, so I asked what happens. She mostly speaks Spanish but understands English, so I started asking her, "Are you hurt?" "Yes." "Did she hit you?" "Yes." "Did she kick you?" "Yes." Then the other child chimes in, "Nuh-uh, I didn't kick her, I just punched her in the face." My sister is a teacher from a local school. Like many great teachers, she's also responsible for a form group. In this case, a rowdy and rambunctious group of 15-year-olds she'd inherited from a newly retired teacher. Some kids stand out more than others, and not always for the right reasons. The epitome of that rule existed in my sister's form group. She had the misfortune to be called Xena by her Tumblr feminist mother, and Xena herself had followed firmly in her mother's footsteps. She was considered unpopular, and certainly the other kids were unfair and cruel, but she didn't help matters herself. My sister has told many stories of Xena, up to and including the time she spontaneously began speaking in an accent, which sounded like the illegitimate offspring of a Pakistani accent, Irish, and a speech impediment. The accent vanished as mysteriously as it had appeared over the course of the lunch hour. The time she claimed the powers of clairvoyance in chemistry. The kid torching pencils with a Bunsen burner apparently never particularly cared if their great-aunt Doreen wanted to warn them of misfortune. The time she shaved her head and refused to wear her uniform because it was stifling her creativity. The John Cena meme was in full swing, and Xena had earned the nickname owing to her buzz cut and unfortunate head shape. Kids would hum his theme tune upon seeing Xena in the school. A memo was sent around the faculty concerning the matter, but half of the staff were convinced that John Cena was a politician. My sister was running improvisation drills when Xena broke in with one of her prime stories. She was the daughter of a Mauritian man named Jonathan, she said. Her skin was the color of milk, smooth and pale. Jonathan was a man of great importance. She had been born in Mauritius and swiftly smuggled over to the UK with her mother, as a newborn. Born and raised in England, by the way. There was a beat of stunned, awkward silence until a particular crapbag of a child screeched, "John Cena!" and slammed his mate's head into the desk. When was your last, "I've got to get the hell out of here" moment? It was years ago when I was in 4th grade. My parents used to get into fights all the time, especially when my dad was drinking. They'd start yelling and that would turn into actual fistfights. At this time we were living in a small trailer, and the room I shared with all 3 of my siblings was the one at the end of the trailer, near the back door. So my dad comes home drunk, mum is angry and starts yelling, and it escalates from there. Being on a small trailer, everything sounds so close and terrifying, and as the oldest of the 4, I felt the need to protect my siblings, but I didn't know what to do. After a while, my mum starts screaming my name at the top of her lungs, and I can still hear my dad screaming too, and I knew that I needed to get myself and my siblings out of there ASAP. I ushered them out of the room, down the hallway, and out the back door, and told them to head to our aunt's place, who lived a few trailers down. My mum was still screaming for me, and all I knew to do was yell, "I got them out, Mum! We're leaving!" before also going out the back to my aunt's. I don't recall ever being that scared. Cops came, and they both went to jail and were both out in a couple of days, and acted like nothing had ever happened. A few years ago, I brought the incident up to my mum. I told her that I thought she was screaming at me to get the siblings out of the house, and that's why I had. She told me she was screaming my name because she was scared and wanted help, and didn't know who else to call for. I felt so bad because I didn't help her, but there's really not much I could have done. I worked in a factory that made large plastic items via filling molds with powder and sending into a giant industrial oven that turned to 550 degrees Fahrenheit. At the end of the week, I was cleaning said oven and my boss, not knowing I was inside, turned it on. At the sound of hydraulic doors closing, I dove out of the oven as they closed and avoided free cremation. I both got the hell out of that oven and that company pretty quick. In the fall, I was walking down the trail in the woods during the middle of the day. A raccoon was sitting in the middle of the trail facing us, sitting on its butt, head kind of lowered, bugs buzzing all around it. It didn't move at all. It just stared at us. We decided to turn around. I don't know what rabies looks like, but that's not how I want to find out. On the New York City subway, I watched a grown man pull his pants down and use the support rod in the middle of the train as leverage to take a wicked, steamy dump while making aggressive eye contact with me and a few other passengers. Hey, when you gotta go, you've gotta go, man. I gave my ex a ride to his court hearing for hitting my daughter. I pointed out to him that inside there was a sign that said no cell phones, and that I would run our phones out to the car and be right back. I felt like my heart was going to break my sternum, and I had tunnel vision as I had called my sister and told her I needed her and her husband to come with their pickup truck to my house right now because I had a small window to get as much of my daughter's and my possessions out of my house before he was released from court. Just as we were wrapping up, I saw him running down the street like Usain Bolt right for me. I yelled for them to drop what they had and get in the truck and go. Just as I close my car door, he runs and tries to smash it open. I fumble with my keys to get the engine started. He then stands in front of my car, blocking my path. I dismissed my burning desire to run him over and threw it in reverse and smashed the gas pedal down the block to the next street. I'd like to say things got better after that, but that was just the beginning of the worst year of my life. Now I'm past all of that and living a better life. I was at a marketing recruitment presentation in college, and this guy started talking about how we would be able to go to Disneyland and buy Ferraris if we just signed up for his exclusive elite program. We just had to make a small down payment right there in the auditorium, and we shouldn't talk about it with friends or family because haters online had damaged the company's reputation. It was Amway, and the guy was Charlie D'Urso. Was in New Orleans interviewing for a job that required driving a company vehicle 10 hours a day that had valuable specialty equipment. Interview was going great and we get to the part about pay. Guy goes, "We can offer you $10 an hour." A big smile came over my face and I leaned over to shake his hand. He thought I was agreeing. I was telling him bye. Popeye's pays around $15 an hour here. My mum was content living with bedbugs, a creepy 50-year-old man who might pay our bills, as well as his kids and our cousins, all in a crappy mobile home that she hadn't been making payments on. It was in such bad shape, it wasn't even worth repossessing. I could never have any time to myself. I was always surrounded by bratty kids while constantly scratching at the bite marks the bugs had left. I'd go to bed at night wearing sweats with socks on hot nights just to try and keep the damn bugs off me. It didn't work. When I was around 14, I went to go live with my grandma. Of course, that made me a backstabber in the eyes of my mum, but she's not relevant in my life anymore. I pulled into a gas station to fill up my car at 4 a.m. on the way to work. The station was well lit and actually pretty busy, so I didn't feel unsafe. I pulled up next to a pump, got out, and just when I put the nozzle in, I heard someone trying to get my attention. He asked if I could call his girlfriend to come pick him up. I called one number, voicemail box full. He gave me a second number, mailbox also full. Then he asked if I had jumper cables and if I could give him a jump. I agreed, thinking the van he was nearby was his vehicle. Then, after I agree, he tells me the story of how he got there. According to him, his car had broken down at another gas station up the street. He said it was closed, so he couldn't get any help. So he borrowed a bike from someone and rode it down to this gas station. Then he went into the gas station to leave the bike there. As soon as he started walking away, my brain started racing and pointing out all the things that didn't add up about the story. First, all I could imagine in those voicemail boxes were a bunch of people going, "Your boyfriend is stuck at a gas station." Then I thought about how in the hell he would legitimately borrow a bike from someone at a closed gas station, in the middle of night, in the middle of winter. At that point, I decided it was time to get the F out of there. Thankfully, I hadn't pumped any gas yet, so I quickly put it back on the pump, got in my car, and tore out of there. I actually felt a little bad because what if he actually needed help? But then I reminded myself about him borrowing a bike in that situation, how he was trying to get me to a dark, secluded secondary location. This dude was absolutely trying to rob and murder me. I was visiting London and just got out of a sports bar by myself at 3 a.m, drunk as crap. I decide to walk from the bar, near Leicester Square, to my hotel, near King's Cross, despite not knowing exactly where I am or how to get to the hotel. I start walking in a direction, and within a minute I'm walking down a rather wide shopping street, when I see two bald guys coming the other way, both pretty much built brick crap houses, and looking like they want to start crap. They hadn't spotted me yet, but one guy suddenly walks to the side of the street and just flat out punches the steel grate in the front of a shop entrance as hard as he can. I pretty much did a straight 180, double-timed it back to the bar, and asked the nice bouncers to get me a cab. Cab drops me off right in front of the hotel, and I go to bed without getting the crap kicked out of me first. Although it's entirely reasonable that those large, shaven-headed gentlemen were simply steel-grate integrity enthusiasts, I don't blame you for noping the heck on out of there. I go to school in Poughkeepsie. One time my friends and I were walking along some train tracks by the river on a foggy night. Not smart. We could barely see 5 feet ahead, but we weren't afraid because it was a popular hangout spot. All of a sudden, we hear a loud barking and a flipping crackhead lunges out of the fog at us, barking like a dog. The fog around him cleared up and we could see more druggies lying under some leaves by the side of the tracks, watching us and laughing. Never ran so fast or came so close to crapping my pants in my life. When my now ex-husband called me to tell me the reason he was late for dinner was because he was arrested for pleasuring himself in public, I got out. I'm too old for that crap. My husband came home from a business trip early yesterday and failed to mention it to me. I heard someone jiggling the doorknob and sprinted out the back door, not getting murdered in my own house. This was like 5 years ago. I was 24 years old, got way too drunk at my local bar, and ended up going back to this guy's apartment. It was decorated by someone's grandmother for sure. There were candelabras everywhere. He lit all of them. Then he sat me on the couch and proceeded to go through all of these old family photo albums, specifically looking at pictures of his siblings and cousins as children. No joke, he was getting so hard that I could see the album start moving up and down. Then he asked me if I had any pictures of when I was a child or my siblings when they were children. Never sobered up so fast and booked it right the F out of there. Because I get replies about drunk driving, this was NYC. I walked 16 blocks through East Harlem and never felt so safe in my life. Oh boy, I have another one. My ex-best friend convinced me to go to a concert with her. I told her I couldn't because I had a long drive the next morning and I didn't want to waste gas or go to bed too late, and she said it was fine. She would drive and would get me home right after the concert. Went to the concert, it was fine. I was ready to go home, but she told me she really wanted to go to an after-party with the band because her crush would be there. I agreed because she really wanted to get with this guy and the chances of it happening seemed high, and I wanted her to be happy. Turns out the after-party was at a decent hotel. Underage kids were straight up walking in with handles of alcohol, and it was really obvious what was going on. The receptionist was eyeing everyone, but nobody gave a frick. My friend and I got to the room. We were the only girls there. Around 40 drunk college guys and 2 girls both under 110 pounds. I'd never experienced being looked at like a juicy steak until that moment. I told her we had to go, but she was hell-bent on staying with her crush. I couldn't convince her, so I called my mum. The most awkward phone conversation of my life, and had her pick me up. Turns out the receptionist called the cops soon after I left, and the party got broken up. I think some people got charged. Last week, I was visiting Los Angeles with my 22-year-old daughter. I had to fill the tank of the rental car. I googled the cheapest gas and waited in line. There was a scummy homeless man yelling, clearly mentally ill. When we got to the pump was broken. You know, when you fill 10 cents of gas and it stops. It took me a full minute to get $1 of gas when the homeless man came up to us. He was yelling, "Now this is a nice car." I grabbed the pump from my daughter and said, "Hit the road!" And we drove off. Funny thing is, my daughter wasn't scared because she was listening to what the man was yelling about. Apparently, the homeless man was being harassed by another driver. The other driver told him not to touch his car. The car was a piece of crap, and the homeless man was making fun of him like, "Oh, don't touch his car. Your car is a piece of crap." That's when he came to our car. "Now this is a nice car. I won't touch this one, but yours is a piece of crap, you butthole." So it ended up being pretty funny. I panicked for nothing. You may have already worked this out, but the narrator had to tone down this individual's language quite a bit so that this video wouldn't get demonetized. I told this once before, but when I was about 8 years old, I was in the car with my parents. They were arguing, which they did a lot, but being trapped in that metal box with them, both of them screaming back and forth, became too much. We stopped at a red light and I unbuckled my seatbelt and got out of the car and started running. My mum, who was in the passenger's seat, ran out after me, and after he pulled over the car, my dad did as well. They caught up to me and their attitudes completely changed. They promised they wouldn't fight again, a promise they broke time and time again until their divorce, but they never did it again in the car. I was at a baseball card convention when news of the incel van attack in Toronto broke. It was a slow afternoon, so a group of us dealers gathered around the lobby TVs to watch, and the other guys started defending him. If he had been an Islamo-terrorist, the frickin' media would have kept that crap under wraps. And, "What do you think's gonna happen when women only go for jerks?" Then the egghead in our group argued that those with less access to women suffer just as much as those with low incomes, and that we should re-educate women to find those men with low sexual market value attractive. I did not want to find out what he meant by re-educate, so I packed up my cards and left. Yes, the women are the problem, not the murderer. Thank God these guys aren't reproducing. Happened a few hours ago. Was in the park with my younger brother just playing football, having a nice time. Suddenly, I see a man looking over in our direction. However, I can't be too sure because I don't have my glasses and I don't want to scare myself for no reason. He's carrying an orange bag, so it's easy to see him. I ignore him and brother and I start walking around randomly. Not following the path, backtracking, just not walking logically, if that makes sense. Kicking the ball to each other. The last time I went to this park on the 1st, a man of the same build and ethnicity followed me, so I felt myself getting paranoid. This man kept his distance, but for instance, we went into the basketball area and he would come to the entrance and lean against the grate, just watching us. He could go behind the trees, it wasn't clear he knew his way around the park, and follow us, which I wouldn't notice if it wasn't for his bag. I wanted to confront him, but I was with my younger brother and didn't want to cause trouble. I wasn't really scared, but more angry and frustrated. The man suddenly starts getting braver and walking faster towards us, so we decide to quickly run home, even though we were only out for 15 minutes. I was at home working on a gate outside. I heard my neighbor shoot off some rounds, so I went to a spot I'd be able to overlook the pond and see if they were getting any of the geese. Then 3 shots came through the bushes right towards my house, roughly 100 feet or so away from me, not towards the pond. So I was like, okay, they're being an idiot. Time to GTFO. I go back to working on the gate about 300 to 400 feet from where I was when I was being stupid and nosy, even though they should not have been firing towards a house. Then a fricking bullet cracked as it went less than 5 feet past my head. Yep, that's when I said, frick this, hid behind a huge-ass tree and called the cops, and waited 45 minutes for them to show up. The guy that I met. College-educated, handsome, retro digs in Long Beach, California. Articulate, funny, packed a picnic for our blind date, complete with cloth napkins. Went back to his place, and the kitchen was a hoarder's dream. At least 6 full sets of dishes, dirty, sitting in neatly stacked piles everywhere. Pots and pans, the same thing. Hundreds of dollars worth of iron cookware stacked on the floor, rusting. Instead of washing dishes, he would buy more. Noped the F out. I told you I was planning on selling them in bulk. One man's trash is another man's treasure. I have leukemia. I completed 5 months of chemo in October, but my white count has been low since then, so I am high risk of infection. My wife just gave birth a few weeks ago, but had severe preeclampsia and had to be put on blood pressure meds. I went to pick up dinner, and on my way home, I figured I'd also grab her meds at the pharmacy real quick. Except a ton of people had the same thought, and I found myself like 20 people back in line. I was set to wait. Wife definitely needed her meds until I hear coughing. I look up and a 2-year-old kid is hacking everywhere. That is no bueno for me. Yep, I had to nope the hell out of that line and send my mother-in-law to the pharmacy for wife's meds. In conclusion, I'm a 35-year-old, tattooed, bearded man afraid of small children. I was at work and thought I needed to fart. Turns out it was diarrhea and made up an excuse to leave for the rest of the day. I have also accidentally crapped my pants at work. I had had some weird coughing fit and diarrhea. I didn't make up an excuse. I told my manager I just crapped my pants and I'm going effing home. He just said, feel better. When I first moved to where I'm living now, it's across the river from a college town/city with a main street that is littered with restaurants and bars. So one night, a couple of friends and I went out and decided to bar hop. Nothing crazy, just wanted to check out the different places. Walked into one hole-in-the-wall joint with only a handful of people in there. Everybody's head turned and looked at us like we were from another planet. Weird vibe immediately, asking how we're doing and what he can get us. We order our round of drinks. Bartender very slowly says, "Is that all?" Again, weird vibe, but whatever. Random guy, later found out to be the owner, comes and sits next to us and starts chatting us up. Where we're from, what we're doing in the area, if we're cool. Lots of weird conversation starters. At this point, we want out, but our drinks haven't come back yet. So we get our drinks and try to keep to ourselves. Guy keeps asking if he can get us anything at all, off the menu. It's at this point that I realize that the 2 women at the other end are doing coke off the bar. There's also now 2 large men standing against the wall right behind us, just grilling us. Not wanting to make a scene, we all shared a talked amongst ourselves for a minute, finished our drinks as fast as possible, paid and left. The owner was trying to talk to us the entire time we were paying and making our way to the door, trying to keep us there as the two large men slowly close in. We got the frick out and said nothing until we hit the other side of the street. Grabbing some Waffle House in a not-so-good part of town around 2 a.m. after work. Dude whipped out a gun and was screaming at the chick he was with. Definitely my most gotta get the F out of here moment. A few years later, got a job as a 911 call taker. Same Waffle House got shot up. So there is that. When I realized the shelter I work for is pocketing donated money, keeping and using donations for themselves first, taking their food, taking housing products, all for their own personal use. These people have well-paying jobs with plenty of overtime, benefits like health life and dental. So yeah, screw that place and screw those people. Sucks for the ones that do have to stay there. I'm black. I live near Alabama. A friend was having a party, but she was using a different friend's house as the venue. The house was deep in the woods, and this man at the gas station was being friendly and joking with us. Everything seemed fine until he said something like, "Don't forget the Klan meeting is tonight at 7. I'm kinda blacked out for a second because I'm sure he meant something else, but I got a bad vibe. A company I was working at got bought out by another company. They tried to make us sign agreements that we wouldn't work in the industry for 2 years after working for our company. So I'm not allowed to have a job in my field for 2 years if they lay me off. A bunch of us refused to sign it, but nothing happened. Then people in management started getting moved around, and they put someone in charge of me who was really incompetent. When a big company buys a small company with a lot of name recognition, I can see the writing on the wall. I got another job and got the heck out of there. What's your "I finally met my online friend" horror story? Back during World of Warcraft's second expansion, there was this guy in my guild I'd become friends with, mostly through other friends. We'd talked more and more over time and become fairly close. He had this butthole roommate and I could hear the guy sometimes, especially when something went wrong during a raid. He'd scream and throw fits. He was pretty awful sounding. My friend told me he wasn't just loud and obnoxious, but verbally and sometimes physically abusive too. I had my own apartment, so I said, "You know what? Come stay with me, just long enough to get you on your feet and into a place that's safe." He showed up at my place with a trash bag full of his stuff and laptop. I set him up in the apartment and started trying to help him find a job. Well, he did not want a job. He did not get a job either. He sat in my apartment day after day, eating my food and slowly draining my savings. No matter how hard I tried to get him motivated, he would just dig in his heels and somehow become more sedentary. Eventually, I told him he had to go. I couldn't afford to keep him there. He was just couch surfing. I spoke to some people and eventually pieced together that his method of securing a new, temporary place was playing on the sympathies of his friends to convince them he was in a terrible living situation. It just worked really well on me because he had that loud, obnoxious roommate to play off. He wound up calling a nearby relative to come and get him, I think his aunt. I don't know what he told her I supposedly did, but I have never seen a more venomous look from someone in my life. As far as I know, he moved in with his sister and brother-in-law after that, but frankly, I don't care where he ended up. He also stole a bunch of my stuff. First and last time I do anything like that. Met this dude on EverQuest and we played some games together ever since. Been a part of the same guild, help each other out on mobile games and have conversations about life in general. It isn't him that's the horror story. It was his mum. So one day, I think we were playing World of Warcraft at the time, I log on to do some quests. Suddenly his user comes on and asks to chat by video. We've done this before and there's no problem, but after I click to start the video chat, there's his mum butt naked on the screen. She asks me to watch her pleasure herself and I'm like, "No lady, this is awkward as F." And I log off for a few days. I get an email from my friend. He wants to know why I haven't shown up for quests or anything. So I tell him what happened and he's seriously like, WTF. Turns out his mum had been doing this to a lot of his online buddies and eventually goes to prison for committing the unspeakable act with a minor or two. Buddy's still doing great though, wife and kids, plus we still play the occasional game together. I never actually met the guy but spoke to him on the phone. We'd met on MySpace when I was in college and exchanged email addresses when we realized we lived in the same town. Eventually, I gave him my phone number and made plans for him to call me. When he did, his voice creeped me out. It was how I imagined a serial killer would sound. By the time I got past it and was comfortable talking to him on the phone, I started noticing other red flags. Whenever I brought the neighborhood up, he changed the subject. At one point, I asked him what his favorite restaurant on the boulevard was, and he hedged. So I made up a restaurant that I said was my favorite. He immediately said that was his favorite too, and he especially loved one of their dishes. He went on and on about this wonderful place that didn't exist, and there wasn't a similar one in town, so he couldn't be confused. I called him out on the fact that he obviously had never been to my neighborhood. Turned out he didn't even live in the same state as me. It's like I don't understand what this person was actually trying to gain. Was he just that starved of human conversation? Guy I knew in college met a girl online and spent every day talking about her. She lived about 6 hours away, so he planned to take a semester off and pursue this relationship. He got a job in her town and asked if I'd help him move out there, since my car would hold more than he could take on the bus. I had a long weekend off and figured, why not? A road trip could be fun. I'd drive him out as a goodbye present, and the way back I planned to visit Yellowstone. Well, we arrive and it turns out he doesn't have an apartment lined up, and he found a job posting in his girlfriend's town. He hadn't actually gotten the job, or even applied yet. I make a bunch of phone calls and find him a room to rent that will let him move in that day with just first, last, and deposit, even without a job. I'm tired and disgusted with his lack of planning, but figure it's worth staying the night and trying to end things on good terms with my buddy. Then he breaks down and confesses he hasn't actually met this girl. The nights he spent video chatting with her were really just him watching her vlog and jacking it. They've never talked, never texted, never even emailed. Hell, he's never even left so much as a comment or like on one of her videos. She genuinely didn't, still doesn't, know he existed. His plan was to hang out at this game shop she talks about until she showed up, and somehow create a relationship from that. He thought that they'd meet and she'd fall in love with him and move back to our college town to marry him, all before the next semester began. That didn't happen. Instead, I made my buddy buy a bus ticket for his ride back to school and left. He came back to school and got more cringy, not less. I lost track of him after that. I met a guy online and we really got on, and he came over a few times so we could hang out. I did find him attractive and tried to hint that I was into him. Note, I can't flirt to save my life. But nothing ever happened. After a few dates, he suddenly vanished offline. No social media, he wasn't answering texts or emails, nothing. I thought he'd ghosted me. After 6 months, he reappears. I asked him where he'd been and he said, "I don't want to talk about it." A few weeks after, there was a fad where people were Googling their names and posting humorous stories they'd found about similar people with their name. Mine was about a ship that had my initials, and I started to Google friends' names just out of boredom and morbid curiosity. Googled his name and found a local news story from his area, one of those crime and courts things that he had been done for statutory assault of a minor, online grooming, and had his computer and phone seized as evidence. When I was younger, I met an online friend in a public space for the first time. He was about my age and hadn't lied about that, so I guess I let my guard down. Anyway, after we walked for a while, I noticed he had led me down a dark alley with no other people. He then looked at me and said how he wanted to really commit the unspeakable act on me right then and there. Right after he had said that, my instinct kicked in and I ran as fast as I've ever run in my life, until I came to the train station. Here I jumped on the first train I saw and got the hell away from him. I'm not sure that's so much an instinct as correctly understanding language verbatim. Also, apologies. The particular subject of this video is just going to naturally entail a certain amount of online predators. This was way back in the mid-90s. Bulletin board systems were all the rage. I made friends with this guy from NC. He was friends with a bunch of us from my dorm, mostly females, which probably should have been a red flag, but I was extremely naive at the time. A couple months in, he mentioned that he was coming to our state for a wedding and asked if he could come by our college to meet everyone. It was agreed he'd sleep in my dorm room since my roommate was almost never around. Now, there was no discussion or thought of sex, but I was pretty excited to meet this guy and see if he was as funny and charming as he was online. Well, day arrives, dude shows up. I should mention that I and all my college friends were 18 or 19. This guy was 24. Or so he said. Guy looks like, and I'm not exaggerating, a cancer patient. Pale, gaunt features, long greasy pale blonde hair, except where he was bald on top, and just generally looked like he was about to die or he was dressed as a ghoul for Halloween. He insisted on hugging all of us. I was trying to remind myself that looks don't matter and that he was a cool guy despite his very unsettling appearance. But then, when we all started hanging out, things just got worse. He was asking really invasive questions of all of us, making weird comments to whatever was said, and just all around creepy and distressing. I was sitting on the floor with another friend and actively rocking back and forth from discomfort. I lied and said I had hurt my back and that sleeping on the floor helped, because that night he kept insisting we could share my tiny, twin college bed. Nope. Last time I ever met anyone from that site. I don't know if it's a horror story, but it's how I ended up where I live now. I played WoW for a few years with a pretty regular group, got to know them offline, and at one point, two of them, a couple, invited me to move across the country. At the time, I didn't have anything tying me to where I was, so I packed up and moved. Got out here, moved in with my friends, and everything seemed okay. My buddy was a long-haul driver, so he was always gone for days at a time. His girl would try to set me up multiple times with two of her friends at the same time. One in Minnesota. I ended up having a hard time finding work for a while, finally got a job though, and was putting some money away while helping watch their kids. Out of nowhere one day, my buddy accuses me of trying to fool around with his girl. Nothing had ever happened, but I had noticed her spending more and more time in my room when he wasn't there. I knew his history and his previous relationship had ended after she cheated with a friend of his. He wouldn't listen, so I got kicked out without any warning and they stole about $1,000 worth of my stuff and later moved. Ultimately, it all worked out for me. Cut the friend and his girl out of my life completely and moved on. Now I have a good job here, wife and kids. Said he was 14. Turns out he was 38. My parents gave him a stern talking to. Everyone in the replies is saying how he was a child molester and all that, but let me clear things up. He was always nice and friendly until I found his Facebook and saw his age, at which my parents had a mental breakdown. Was never allowed to play video games with him online again. Returning to this post later, okay, maybe he was. After college, I was playing a game called EVE Online. I was in a corporation with a dude who I thought was the coolest. He had sold stuff in-game for real-world money and had built a supercomputer. He had a smoking hot girlfriend and had pictures of them rock climbing doing some super cool things. He was also like a head chef where he worked, and since I was a chef as well, I had a little bit of a bromo crush on him. He told me after I graduated that he could hook me up with a manager job and all I had to do was move up there. I sold everything I owned that day at a pawn shop and bought a U-Haul and started driving. 1 hour before I got there, it was like a week-long drive, he called me and told me the job was no longer available and I shouldn't come. When he found out how close I was, he said to just come anyways. When I got there, I was completely blown away. They lived in a disgusting Section 8 apartment with 4 other people, in a 1-bedroom apartment. They had like 3 cats, which I'm allergic to, and a kid as well. Day 1, it was all illegal substances and partying. I did not partake. I was not enthused. Day 2, I went into the city looking for a crap job to survive. I got one. It was terrible. Day 3, my buddy tells me we're all moving out and into a nice apartment. Week 3, we actually move into a new apartment, and the first night in that apartment, he starts beating his smoking hot girl in front of their child. The second time he beat her, I called the cops. Him and his girlfriend immediately said I was the bad guy and that they were just loving each other. They had the cops escort me from the apartment. So there I was, 1,700 miles away from home, homeless at 2 a.m., and it's frickin' raining on all my things. Lars, you are a sack of crap and I hope you die of space herpes. Look, most chefs aren't crazy, spouse-abusing, illegal substance addicts. But as a guy who worked 8 years in hospitality, I will say that I met more chefs that fit that category than in any other field I've worked in. I've been active in numerous online communities over the years, and have been fortunate enough to hang out with many of the friends I've made there in person. There's only been one incident I couldn't cope with. He picked me up at the airport, which was very nice of him, and as soon as we got into the car, he started picking his nose. There's a lot that goes through your mind when you hop into a vehicle with someone you've never been alone with, and you immediately catch them 2 knuckles deep in their rostrum. I looked quickly away so that he wouldn't know I caught him and be embarrassed if he was trying to sneak one out before I noticed. If he did notice, he didn't seem embarrassed, so I relaxed a little. I guessed maybe he was so confident about himself and our friendship that he descended past caring if I saw him take care of a quick boog. Fine, sure. When I finally looked back at him, he was wiping his fingers across his dashboard. To this day, I'm not really sure what to think, but this guy spent the entirety of the few hours we were together scooping out boogers and wiping them off on parts of his car, or the table, or wherever it was that we'd stopped at. I realized I was being transported in a rolling booger shrine, and that there was nothing I could touch without needing to wash my hands. I was sitting on a crust of fossilized booger stuff. I had to be. I didn't want to hurt his feelings. He was a nice dude, but I wound up ollieing out of our visit early because I couldn't handle it. I don't consider myself a clean freak, but as wiping started to stack, it was all I could do to not throw open the passenger door and roll myself out into traffic to escape. I still wonder if I should have done or said anything to save him some grief in the future, but it didn't feel like it was my place, you know? What do you even say? He was driving cross-country with a friend. I said I had a couch or floor they could crash on if needed. He was great. She was an annoying cow. She hated everything, was annoyed by my cat, didn't like anything I had to eat or drink, etc. They were literally there for like 16 hours. I met a really cool group of people from a chat group website called XAT that lives in minimal distance away from me, like maybe 15 minutes, and the horror story part is that I was in my emo phase and probably made a lasting impact on their lives as a hot topic connoisseur. After 4+ years of playing World of Warcraft together and chatting, online and on the phone, he invited me to visit him in Australia. I figured it was safe since I'd known him for quite a while and had never gotten any weird vibes. No flirtation, no creeperiness, nothing. 2 days into my very clearly stated platonic visit, he tried to commit the unspeakable act with me. I ditched all my stuff except for what I had in a small duffel bag and took off, traveling on my own for the 2 weeks until my flight home. A few months later, I received an unsigned postcard from the Gold Coast that just said, "Thinking of you," with a smiley face. Ugh. Obviously the first offense is worse, but that postcard is just… ugh. Not a horror story, but about a year after I made the move from Massachusetts to South Carolina, I was playing video games and a guy on my team talked about how he just moved into a house in the same area that I moved from. So I PM'd him and turns out he had moved into my old place and was playing in my old room with his desk in the same spot I had mine. Wow, this one isn't creepy, but probably the strangest one I've read so far. A couple of years ago, this girl messaged me on Reddit saying she had really connected with a comment I made about first seeing the ocean, because she had just gone through a similar experience. She was going to come down to Chicago to visit a friend of hers, and asked for suggestions of things to do. I gave her a bunch, and then we kept talking and finding out that we had more and more in common. We eventually started talking over the phone and text messages, and when she came down, we went out for burgers and beer. We kept talking every day after that, and I was really starting to like her. She said she wanted to come down to Chicago again if she could stay with me. I told her, of course, and a few weeks later she was here for Saturday and Sunday. Really, it was mostly just Sunday because she got in late on Saturday and fell asleep on my couch. The next day we went to the zoo and had a really amazing day. After that, we came back to my place and decided to go to the brewery nearby, which made a beer that had her name in it. We went there and then ended up bar hopping through until we ended up near the dive bar by my apartment. We drank and played pool there and eventually grabbed some to-go beers and headed back. I asked if she wanted to see the place by the river I liked to go and drink and think. We sat and eventually started making out and decided to head back to my apartment. We hooked up and then the next day went to the south side to get breakfast at a place she really liked near her friend's apartment before she had to drive back. We kept talking after that and I was planning on coming up to visit her in Detroit. But then one day she just ghosted me out of nowhere. Not as horrible as some other stories, but it was really crappy for me because I actually really liked this girl, and to this day I have no idea why she stopped talking to me. By the way, she's definitely not dead. We followed each other on Instagram and I saw that she was okay a bit after she ghosted me. I had a layover in Amsterdam and I met up with a buddy I'd been chatting with on Soulseek for years. Electronic music file sharing. He gave me directions to his work, we delivered a huge wheel of cheese to a church in the red light district, then got drunk and high in a bar. 10 out of 10, most Dutch experience possible in Amsterdam. Only horror show part was how tall Dutch people are and how they speak English. This guy was like 6'7" and his voice was high to match, and all loopy and sing-songy. Very hard to take seriously as a person. Dutch people have the worst accent, really. And I can know 'cause I'm Dutch. The narrator would like to sincerely apologize for his Dutch accent. I'd been chatting to a girl for quite some time and finally ended up visiting her house, about 50 miles away, for an evening of enjoying each other's company. We wake up the next morning to loud noises, which turned out to be her fiancé I knew nothing about, ripping a window off its hinges and climbing in as she'd locked him out. Locked the door and left the key in the lock. There was a strange car on the driveway, so he thought she might be in trouble. Alas, it was me in trouble, as this guy was huge and a bit upset at this point. I managed to talk him down and explained the situation, to then find she had called the police and accused him of breaking and entering. During the time the police were questioning him, I made my escape and hightailed it out of there. I had a guy profess his love for me, over Skype. He wanted to come see me. He lived in the UK, I live in the States. Okay, I'll include some backstory. I knew him for about 3 years prior. He was a fairly popular streamer at the time, and I was one of his viewers. Eventually became a mod for him. We started talking on Discord and then Skype. I was 20 at the time of this event. Except, I had a boyfriend at the time. I told him this. I told him that he was wasting his time and I have zero interest in him. He is still coming. I told him there was no time to see him as I had work and school. He says, it's fine. He will wait until I have time to see him. I told him not to come. He says he has his parents' blessings. So he came. He stayed in a hotel for 3 weeks while I had to deal with finals, work, and spending time with my boyfriend. I hung out with him twice, once with a group of friends and once with my boyfriend. He got mad because he said he wanted to hang out with me, alone, in his hotel room, and when I said no, he flipped. He said that because he flew over here, I should at least hang out with him. He flew back home to the UK a few days later and blocked me on all social media. In conclusion, dude travels from the UK to profess his love for me, is upset that I didn't change my mind. Why did I even meet him? I knew him for a long time. I thought we were friends. I thought that he would come and realize that I didn't have feelings for him if I said it to his face. I thought I could save the friendship. I never thought he would hurt me. But even then, I was never alone with him, not even close. What's a rule that was implemented somewhere that massively backfired? My city has issues with loud bikes and vehicles, so as a deterrent, the city put up decibel meters that displayed how loud your engine is, similar to those signs that read your speed and display it to you. But instead of deterring anyone, people would pull up to those signs and rev the heck out of their engines to see who could get the highest decibel count. The city took the counters down within a week. I work in manufacturing and we get paid piece rate, so the more I run, the more I get paid. We also have a base hourly pay rate of $10 per hour, so whichever pays more, the hourly rate or the piece rate, is what we get paid for the day. On bad days, sometimes they bump us up to $12 an hour for the day, and when we train new people, we get paid $15 an hour to compensate for having to slow down or stop our machines to teach the new people. The big boss, my boss's boss's boss, came in last week. Now, he used to work the line like I do now, but you can tell he's living comfortably in his corporate life and has forgotten some of the bad parts of this job. He told my boss that we are no longer to receive training pay because, by his logic, if we're working with someone, we should be making more than $15 an hour anyway. And these past 3 weeks or so, we have been doing a lot of training. So a few of us got together at the end of the day and agreed, if they aren't paying us, we won't train people. We will teach the new people enough to make us some money and leave the training to the designated trainers. 2 people split between 15 or so new hires, but they make $17.50 an hour. The policy lasted 4 days. Buddy of mine told me about a happy hour promotion a bar ran close to his campus. Apparently the special was something stupid like 50-cent beers that lasted until the first person went to the bathroom. As he tells it, the first few weeks went without incident, but once it became more popular, people were going to extreme lengths to not be that guy, including wearing adult diapers. Once people tried to covertly pee in corners and trash cans, the bar cancelled the promotion. At my old job, someone abused lunch, so they made a few of them text in when they started and finished lunch. One guy specifically would text the start time, place he got food, his order in detail, the address, price, etc., even when he bought a snack while out. That stopped a week later. Good old malicious compliance, the greatest form of rebellion against an overregulated, lifeless workplace. Worked for a marketing firm that often locked you out of the building if you weren't back in your cubicle by the second your break was up. They revoked your break the next day as punishment. This is not legal here in New York State. They got into a lot of trouble. The organizers of the 1994 Caribbean Tournament Cup had a rather odd change to the rules for extra time. If a game was still drawn at full time, it would go to extra time, but the first goal scored would win. This is perfectly normal, the golden goal rule. What was different is that they ruled that winning this way would count as having won by 2 goals for the purpose of the tournament qualification, instead of just 1. Barbados went into a match against Grenada needing 2 goals to qualify for the main tournament. If they lost, or won by only 1 goal, Grenada would qualify instead. Under the regular rule, this would mean that if the match went to extra time, there would basically be no point in Barbados playing because even if they scored, they would only win by 1 goal and not qualify. But the 2-point roll would motivate them to play on. Sound good? Well, you might be able to guess what happened. The match looked like it was about to end with Barbados 2, Grenada 1. A win for Barbados, but not the 2 goals they needed. So Barbados deliberately scored an own goal in the last few minutes of the match, making the score 2-2, hoping to trigger extra time and a chance to score the magic 2-value goal. The Grenada players quickly realized they could do the same, score an own goal to make the match 3-2 to Barbados, which would have Barbados winning by only 1 goal so Grenada would qualify. But the Barbados players realized that too, and so they began to defend Grenada's goal. So for the last 7 minutes of the match, Grenada were trying to score a goal in either net, since scoring a goal against Barbados would give them 3-2 and they would win the match, and scoring in their own goal would make it 3-2 to Barbados, so they would lose the match but win the qualification, and Barbados were defending both. Amazingly, Barbados did actually manage to do so, successfully defending themselves while half of their team were defending Grenada's goal against Grenada, and then scored the golden goal in extra time and qualified. When Domino's said all pizzas would be delivered in 30 minutes or less or your pizza was free, all the delivery drivers kept getting in car accidents to get your pizza to you on time, so it wouldn't come out of their paycheck. It was a short-lived venture. My company has a strict no-alcohol policy. You can't begin work within 10 hours of having had a drink. So when there's a staff shortage and they need me to come in right away, guess who just cracked open a cold one? My work has an infraction system. If you're a minute late, that's half a point. If you're up to 4 hours late, that's half a point. So if you're going to be a minute late, you might as well be 4 hours late because it's the same penalty. For those of you who keep pointing out that you would miss 4 hours of pay, I know. My work is weird and lets you fill in missing time with a PTO at the end of the work week. We also don't get sick days. So you have to take PTO if you are sick, and even then you're likely to get points because you called in less than 24 hours before your shift starts. It's not an issue if you get half a point and don't get another for 6 months, because the first one will have fallen off by then. English law in Wales set the death penalty for stealing a sheep. Welshmen caught stealing sheep would claim to be making love to them. They would get a lesser penalty for bestiality. The consequence of this is that the Welshmen gained a reputation as sheep shaggers. A famous example from Freakonomics was when a daycare started charging a small fine for parents who picked up their children late. Instead of resulting in more on-time arrivals, the new policy actually caused more late pickups. This is because the parents were originally worried that a late pickup would be a significant burden on the daycare employees. But because the fine was so small, only a few dollars, they decided that it must not be a big inconvenience for the daycare. Alcohol bans at college football games has led to increased intoxication problems because fans are loading up before going in the stadium. Yep, funny how people turning up to a game loaded instead of gradually getting tipsy over 2 hours might have increased the occurrence of boozed-up altercations. Worked for a warehouse 4 days a week, 11 a.m. through 9:30 p.m. Monday to Thursday. They reiterated many times during the interview process that overtime was optional. My first day, my supervisor told me that overtime is indeed optional, but if you don't stay for overtime, then everybody else has to stay even later. So if you do leave on time, don't come back. Whatever. I didn't mind the extra hours too much, although a 10.5-hour shift is already long. But the bonus was that we could all go early if all the orders were done. As you can imagine, the good workers busted their butts from start to finish cutting as many corners, good and bad ones, as they could in order to get out early. Normally, this ended up with us being able to leave around 15 minutes early, or on a really good day where the stars aligned, i.e. everyone showing up, we could leave as early as 7:30 or 8. However, leaving that early only happened once or twice a year at most. Overtime was every week. Every single Monday we would work until 2 a.m. 11 a.m. to 2 a.m. isn't ideal when you have no idea when you're off. At around 7 p.m. we'd start to get an idea if we're in for another hour or another 6. One of the genius new hires mentioned to the boss in the office how he was hoping to get out by 6. Oh, good. Apparently, the boss was thinking us leaving early was a common occurrence now and decided that no one was going to be leaving early anymore. Sweep or dust or whatever, but no one leaves until 9:30. All of a sudden, we were late every single day without fail. Why? We were working our butts off to get out early, but failing every day and ending up on time or still late. By taking away our ability to leave early, everyone gave up working hard. Slow down, we got another hour left anyways. I'm not sweeping. Went from about 45 hours a week to 55. 13 hours every day. Nobody ever left early anymore, but nobody left on time either. Losses for everybody involved because the boss didn't realize that us leaving early for 2 days out of a year actually gave us the daily motivation to work our butts off on the other 360. In conclusion, boss put a stop to leaving early. No incentive to work our butts off anymore means paying overtime every day. I worked at Macy's one Christmas and found out the reason why you can never find anyone at the registers. It's because they don't allow employees to stand at the register, because it's intimidating. I can't tell you how many times I gave up trying to purchase something there because I couldn't find anyone to ring me up. One of the high-rise blocks I have to maintain has a sign saying, "Anything left here will be removed due to it being a fire risk." People just dump the crap there they don't want, like fridges and sofas, and by law, we have to take it. F me, right? To clarify, I have no authority to put up cameras as they are council blocks, and I'm a council worker that has zero help from management, because quite frankly, they don't give a crap because they don't have to remove it. Congrats, British taxpayers, you pay me to remove jerks fly-tipping daily. I'm sorry for the crappy human beings on this earth. The British government was concerned about the number of venomous cobra snakes in Delhi. The government therefore offered bounty for every dead cobra. Initially, this was a successful strategy, as large numbers of snakes were killed for the reward. Eventually, however, enterprising people began to breed cobras for the income. When the government became aware of this, the reward program was scrapped, causing the cobra breeders to set the now worthless snakes free. As a result, the wild cobra population further increased. The apparent solution for the problem made the situation even worse. Ah yes, bounty systems. Abused at the cost of almost everyone apart from the hunters themselves, nearly every time they've been introduced in history. Case in point. In French Indochina, there was a major problem with rodents eating supplies and bringing disease. Given the plentiful supply of cheap unemployed workers, the colonial authorities thought they could be used to kill the rats and bring their numbers down. The French had a somewhat racially prejudiced view of the work ethic of the locals, so decided to pay them per rat killed, rather than per hour worked. Each was compensated for every dead rat they handed over. A year or so later, the colonial authorities discovered the peasants had set up rat breeding farms in the jungle. Dry counties were meant to reduce the use of alcohol in certain areas, but they resulted in people who wanted to get drunk driving further away from home to do so, increasing the odds and frequency of drunk driving accidents. Also, many attempts to rescind dry county laws ended up getting countered by campaigns paid for by the bars and liquor stores that set up on the edge of dry counties, typically under the guise of religious messages. Yesterday in Kenya, our governor in Nairobi banned public transport from getting to town, so people had to walk long distances to work. And since we don't have enough pavements, people ended up walking on the roads, like 3,000, and there was a traffic jam that lasted for more than 5 hours. The next day, the ban was removed. Question 1. What was the goal of banning public transport? They thought public transport was the reason behind all the traffic jams and noise pollution, which is wrong. Easiest way to fix things is to inconvenience people with money and power. Washington state made it mandatory for schools to drop their room temperatures to save on electricity. The result? Teachers brought their own heaters into the offices and use of electricity increased. Not a law. My school does this and have made it clear it costs $1,000 a day to heat our buildings. They dropped the temp and it can be 50 degrees Fahrenheit in the morning in my classroom. Everyone has space heaters, which are illegal by the fire code. Admin and maintenance freak out over it, but refuse to turn up the heat as they sit in their separately heated offices at a comfortable temperature. Not sure if it's still the case, as I graduated many years ago, but where I went to college, the hospitals had a thing where if someone came in with alcohol poisoning and they were underage, then they'd also call the cops. So of course, what happened was when underage kids really should have gone to the hospital, their friends wouldn't call an ambulance because of fear the cops would punish people. Luckily, while I was there weren't many deaths due to alcohol poisoning, but there were more than 0. I worked somewhere with a clean desk policy on Friday afternoons. The common way around this was that everyone would just sweep all their paperwork into an envelope, stick it in the internal mail, and then it would arrive back on your desk on Monday morning. At one point in history, the president of Paraguay tried to eliminate racism by making it illegal to marry someone within your own ethnic group. Needless to say, this was quite racist. "You have to eat whatever you touch" was a rule in my kindergarten which led to all the children touching all the food to call dibs on it. Head teacher at the school I worked at made it a rule that the primary-aged kids, 5 through 11, weren't allowed to run when they were out in the playground. That was fun to try and enforce. Let's not allow young children to run on the playground during their recess at school. What could go wrong? Why are the kids getting so fat? Middle school wanted to create a trash-free environment, so they removed the trash cans from the parking lots, halls, and cafeteria. Then just told the kids to toss your trash when you get home or in a classroom. The amount of litter skyrocketed overnight. After a week or so, they brought back the cans. Last summer in Sweden, bus drivers in some counties started wearing shorts due to the heatwave. After being denied to continue doing so by management, they started wearing skirts instead. Dress code policies had banned shorts, but not skirts. Okay, I lived in Sweden during that time and I never saw this. I desperately hope it's true. Gotta love that country. Air pollution became a big problem in the late 80s and early 90s Athens, mostly due to the number of old, heavily polluting cars on the roads. So the Greek government made a law where only cars with odd-numbered final digits on their number plates, 1, 3, 5, and 7 and 9, etc., could be driven on odd-numbered days, 1st, 3rd, 5th, etc., and only even-numbered cars could drive on evenly numbered days. Sounds great, doesn't it? They'll halve the number of cars on their roads, right? No, they doubled it. Everyone brought one old, highly polluting car that had an odd-numbered plate and another with an even-numbered plate. Nobody could park and the air was worse than before. A hotel I used to work for decided they were having an alcohol-free holiday party. This didn't sit well with the people who'd been working there for years and were accustomed to a full bar at the party. The staff parking lot ended up being full of people drinking in their cars, trying to get a good buzz to carry them through the party, and most people ended up getting way drunker than they would have done so. The party was a crap show. My friend had a non-alcohol wedding. Nearly everyone took fairy dust instead, completely opposite of the sober event the parents wanted. The previous school I worked at decided that all shirts needed to have the school name or emblem, which was a fancy letter E, on them to be dress code appropriate. That's all the handbook said. No clarification on how the name or emblem was displayed, or the color, or if it had to be permanently affixed to the clothing. The students hated the policy, and being in high school, looked for any loophole possible. They found one due to the lack of clarity of the handbook policy. The kids would make paper E's and pin them to their shirts. Thus, they could wear whatever they wanted, and by pinning the E to the shirt were still dress code compliant. I thought it was pretty genius. The administration did not. Explicit adult content being banned on Tumblr. If you look for why LiveJournal failed, you'll read that it was old and obsolete or new platforms were hipper. Nope, it did 2 things. Number 1, made itself harder to use with crappy new features. Number 2, it banned adult content. Wait, I thought weird adult content was all Tumblr was good for. If I want wholesome, pointless bullcrap, Pinterest already exists. If they took adult content off Tumblr, there'd only be one blog left called Bring Back the Adult Content. Catholic school. This school started out not having a problem with Harry Potter. Library had every available book at the time. Not all were even written yet. Some paranoid parent cried Satanism and witchcraft, so the school banned Harry Potter. Suddenly, Harry Potter books are an underground commodity. The school had a black market trade for new and used Harry Potter books, and things only got worse when expulsion was threatened for being caught with one. A new Harry Potter book was worth its weight in gold. Finally, the school had to go all the way to the bishop about the Harry Potter books, and he said, "No, the books don't really teach Satanism. What is all this about a black market book trade?" So the school lifted the ban and told the parents to cool it. Doesn't this happen in one of the Harry Potter books when Umbridge bans the issue of the Quibbler where Harry has told the truth about Voldemort returning? Suddenly everyone had to get their hands on it and read it because it was prohibited. I worked at a contract agency that works with Child Protective Services. CPS policy is to never tell the parents who called CPS on them, but my agency's policy was to always inform the primary caretaker if one of our social workers called it in. Obviously, this irrevocably destroyed our rapport with our clients. Imagine telling a parent you called CPS on them only to knock on their door the next week to listen to their concerns. The agency made an asshat out of us, and all potential for case progression was out the door. Stupid rule, if you ask me. A salon I worked at one day decided to drug test the hairstylists. Out of the 12 stylists, 11 failed. Their manager texted everybody the next day and told them to come to work. I'm a stylist and I say this to applicants all the time. If they drug tested, there wouldn't be anyone working here. No card games at school. When I was in elementary or middle school, Magic the Gathering and the Pokemon card game were pretty popular. Almost all the guys played and would get together after lunch to play before classes started again. Here is where it's important for me to mention that this was a Christian school. It probably didn't take long for a teacher, administrator, or helicopter parent to wonder what all the fuss was about. Sure enough, one of them probably got a hold of a Magic the Gathering card, saw art depicting a demon, and decided that this had to be the work of Satan to warp our young minds. Almost overnight, all trading card games were banned from school. Any cards would be confiscated until the end of the school year. Well, now you have several dozen prepubescent boys with about 30 minutes of free time and nothing to do. So we did boy crap. Ran around, pushed each other, went places we weren't supposed to, just overall got into mischief. All this time, they had a free babysitter that was keeping us all engaged, quiet, civil, all while reinforcing quick math skills and teaching multi-level problem solving. The next year, we got a new administrator and card games were allowed at school again. When I was in school in the era of Pokemon cards, if you'd tried to take ours away, there would have been a full-blown revolt. This school, if anything, got off lightly. When I worked for immigration, some bright spark decided that we weren't going to remove people who had been caught smuggling illicit substances from certain countries. They believed it was too risky to deport people who had failed to complete their jobs back to angry gangs. News traveled quickly, and within a few weeks there was a huge spike in smuggling. People were smuggling over illicit substances and immediately handing themselves over to authorities to guarantee they wouldn't get deported. In addition, dealers found it much easier to convince people to attempt to smuggle illicit substances because it was a win-win for all parties. The whole idea was scrapped pretty quickly. Not exactly a rule, but just last week my job thought it was a good idea to take away our electric cart pusher machine because they felt we didn't need it. The very next day, the place was absolutely packed and we couldn't get carts in fast enough. In an attempt to discourage surfing during work hours in 50s Australia, the government brought into effect a law which stated that any man surfing before 5 p.m. would have to do so in a dress. This prompted more people than would usually be surfing during the daytime to don their wives' dresses and head down to the beach and surf for the couple of weeks the law existed. Lawyers, has there ever been a time the opposing counsel accidentally proved your case for you, and what happened? My favorite is a story from Gary Spence. For those of you who don't know, he's a famous trial attorney. A witness on the stand was claiming that he suffered injuries to his arm because of a city bus accident. Jerry asked him to demonstrate to the jury how far he can lift up his arms after the accident. The witness makes a feeble effort of lifting his arm. Then Jerry asks the witness to demonstrate to the jury how far he could lift his arm up before the accident. He lifts his arm much higher. The jury laughs. The case is over. Domestic violence case where the husband beat the wife senseless. Landlord tried to evict wife for breach of lease due to the beating. Landlord claimed wife violated lease terms by allowing police to be called to property and causing a disruption. My argument was that as a domestic violence victim, wife is covered under the VAWA, and the property is HUD subsidized. Also, MD Law offers domestic violence protections too. Landlord's Counsel during his opening talks about how my client was beaten and the police were called and an ambulance, etc. I just stood there looking at him. When he finished, the judge asked if I had anything to say. My response, "No, Your Honor, I believe opposing counsel has said everything that needs to be said." The judge smiled and ruled in my client's favor. Landlord can't evict a domestic violence victim. My family did foster care for a few years and we fell in love with the last girl we took in, now my younger sister. She was required to keep in regular touch with her emotionally and physically abusive birth mum, the intention being for them to eventually reunite. This woman was a horror. Every single time they interacted, she'd spend the duration painstakingly shredding my sister's self-confidence. My parents worked hard to establish a strong rapport and supportive environment, and she blossomed under their care. She's one of the most resilient people I know. When the state tried to return her to her mum, she didn't want to go, so my parents sued, I think, don't really know all the legal details, for guardianship. This seemed like it would be an uphill battle. Here we were, a family of randos trying to steal a kid from her rightful mum. We were really afraid she would have to go back and that her crappy family would systematically undo all the hard work she'd done rebuilding her self-esteem. Fortunately, her idiotic mum decided to represent herself at the guardianship hearing. I wasn't in the room, but I heard the audio recording later on, and it's incredible how thoroughly this woman shot herself in the foot. Some highlights. She kept trying to testify while cross-examining people. "Would it surprise you to learn that blah blah blah?" The judge called her out for this like 6 separate times, and she just kept doing it. She would admit to various incidents of emotional abuse, but then tried to argue that it was all justified because her daughter was being a B-word. She'd ask witnesses, for example, "And wouldn't you be angry if your daughter did XYZ? Yes or no?" My personal favorite and best example of her proving our case. "It's absolutely not true that I hit my daughter with a wooden spoon. I only tried and missed. I'll prove it. I can show you the mark I left in the door frame." Needless to say, we won guardianship. My sister never has to see that awful woman again unless she damn well pleases. The Dunning-Kruger effect occurs when a person's lack of knowledge and skills in a certain area cause them to overestimate their own competence. This lady may be a walking, talking example of said effect, both in her capacity as a parent and a lawyer. I worked as an intern for a lawyer. Construction laws in France are quite strict in regards to the neighboring of historical monuments. The city was denying a permit for heavy modification of the house of our clients. They were arguing that because you could see the house from the church's bell tower, modifications were impossible. As a support, they kindly linked us a 360-degree picture from said bell tower. We, as kindly, pointed out to them that our client's house was indeed not visible from the top of the church. Building permit was greenlit the following day. Not a lawyer, but I am a former insurance fraud investigator. We were at a hearing before the WCB. I had something like 18 hours of video spread over a 2-week period of a claimant doing roofing work. The problem for me was that the video didn't get a clear face shot. Normally, what we liked to do was get in close, show the face for positive identification, and then zoom out. Bonus if the claimant was wearing distinctive clothing that could be easily tied to him. Because of where this guy lived, all I could do was show someone who matched his description getting out of a truck registered to him every morning. He wore a hat, he had a beard, and he had neither at the hearing. So the company lawyer is prepping me and basically letting me know to be on point because the claimant's attorney is almost certainly going to challenge the fact that it is his client in the video. If the video got tossed, the case was lost. About 2 minutes into the hearing, claimant's attorney agrees to stipulate to the fact that it is his client in all of the video. All of it. Our attorney was shocked. That was pretty much the only leg he had to stand on. Claimant attorney was incredibly smug right after this, like it was no big deal. Evidently, his strategy was to show that his client wasn't really a professional roofer since he was doing the roof the wrong way. He tried to get me to answer questions about roofing. I refused as it was beyond the scope of my work, and he just wouldn't let it go. After about an hour of back and forth over this, the judge finally said, "Counselor, it doesn't matter if your client is doing the work well. What matters is that he has stated numerous times under oath that he cannot work. Whether he's doing it for free, for cash, or for fun, has no bearing on the fact that he's doing roofing work while collecting compensation benefits, which he was awarded because he couldn't do roofing work. The guy lost and had to repay a bunch of benefits. After a few of those hearings, I began formulating a list of lawyers I would never hire and ones who I would absolutely want on my side. I had to go to court over a financial screw-up when I was a student. Took advice from the university legal support team who said I didn't need a solicitor, so I went alone. The judge didn't like this and postponed it for another date so I could prove I'd had more counsel first. The other party's solicitor caught me outside the court and said, "I didn't tell you this, but," and pointed out a huge error in the financial paperwork that made it very obviously come out in my favor. Went back to legal support, got confirmation that it was right, went to the second hearing alone and got the entire thing thrown out. The other solicitor winked at me as he left. Saved me about $9,000. Nice chap. Not a lawyer, but took my brother-in-law's landlord to small claims court. He's on SSI and I'm his conservator. We sued her for over $4,000 after she just decided she didn't like him and changed the locks on his apartment door. She also stuffed all of his belongings into trash bags and dragged them out to the curb. This was all done the day after she cashed his rent check. It all started because she was letting herself into his apartment with no notice and was going through his stuff while he was gone. When I found out about this, I told him to let her know that it was not okay. He did, and that's why she kicked him out. I'm very organized and presented the judge with a folder containing photos, receipts, short videos on DVD, and the sheriff call logs, as well as a concise timeline of events. The landlord showed up with her son and countersued for the exact same amount we were suing them for, claiming that the apartment was trashed, there were holes in the walls, and they would have to repair everything before being able to rent again. During the hearing, the judge asked for evidence of the damage to the room. The son whipped out his cell phone and showed a video panning and walking around the room. The video showed my brother-in-law's apartment obviously still being lived in. His stuff was all still there, and no visible damage, but there were a lot of posters and things hung on the walls. When the judge looked at the video, he asked, "Where's the damage?" The son replied, "You can't see it. It's behind all the posters." The judge frowned and looked at the video again and said, "Did you take this video when he was still living here at the time?" The son replied, "Yes." This was the clincher. The judge then asked, "Did you ask his permission to enter the apartment to take the video?" Silence. We were awarded the full amount. There is just something so deliciously satisfying about this kind of case. A bunch of dishonest, awful people being utterly destroyed for their dishonesty. I had a misdemeanor possession case I was defending. Client was driving his mum's car. He gets pulled over for playing the stereo too loud. There are pills in the center console, in a prescription pill bottle. The bottle has his mum's name on it. Client gets arrested and charged with possession of a controlled substance without a prescription. Case is obviously bullcrap, but the dumbest DA I've met in my entire life won't dismiss. We go to trial. During closing arguments, the DA says, "This case is a circumstantial evidence case." During my closing, I slap the jury instruction on the projector that says if a case is based on circumstantial evidence and there is one factual scenario that points to guilt and one that points to innocence, the jury must find in favor of the defendant and acquit. My client was acquitted. I had a hearing where the opposing party offered an updated contract that my client supposedly signed, except it was a horrible copy and barely readable. Then he assured the judge that the new same as the old contract, except for the party name at the top. The original contract was in his mum's name, the new one in his name, and the date of the contract itself. He made that assurance multiple times. After he exhausted himself saying how everything was the same, I then pointed out to the judge that half the provisions were different, and that my client had never signed that form. The judge asked if we were really accusing him of forging my client's signature, since that's a serious accusation. I held up the guy's prior conviction for contract fraud and said, "I absolutely am, Your Honor." We won, hands down. No further argument needed. My dad's ex-girlfriend took us to court over his estate after he kicked her out. Her claim was that she was entitled to half the pie due to the de facto marriage. She had mountains of evidence of her contribution to Dad's company and running the private estate. Expense reports, receipts, dates and times her and Dad proved their relationship with trips and combined spending, etc., etc. She had so much evidence, the judge took 4 days to look it all over, after which he came back and basically said, "Why the heck would you have all this if this wasn't your plan the whole time?" The case was very downhill from there. Okay, for some more clarification, she'd done the same thing to her ex-husband. giving precedent. He and her children said so in their testimonies. One of her children even inadvertently admitted she'd told them what to say and paid them for it. We were able to name the date the relationship between her and my dad ended, which was months before she claimed, and outside the time limit to make it de facto common law marriage. We had testimony from the doctor at his ICU who said she tried to keep everyone, including his ex-wife, our mother, and us, his children, away from him. Meanwhile, she had his phone and computer and was trying to take over his contacts and businesses. We had proof of this. Her lawyer was a moron who constantly contradicted himself and the evidence. He lost documents, gave incorrect dates, and asked irrelevant questions of the defense. In the end, it was that her expenses for the relationship were deemed normal for anyone in any kind of romantic relationship, that gifts and meals aren't claimable for compensation, and that her contributions to the household and business were not sufficient to warrant compensation. She never actually put any money into either, and that the relationship was not sufficient in duration to qualify as a common law marriage. This case took 4 frickin' years to settle, including 2 elevations of appeals. She finally gave up because she'd run into about $250,000 of court fee debt, as well as being forced to pay us $40,000. Not a lawyer, but was taken to court once. A guy had taken my family to court basically because he had been dating my mother, and things ended. Every cheeseburger, every Kit Kat. He even billed for things he did like house repairs. Some of the repairs were terrible and ruined other things. He tried to unclog the sink and ended up destroying the main drain pipe for the house. Now, he had bought some more expensive things as well. No one asked him to, but he was one of the types that loved to show how much money he had and would always talk about his connections and would name drop someone anytime we went anywhere. So when he takes us to court with his full itemized list, the judge asks him to go first and present his testimony. He basically says, "While I was with them, I brought all this stuff. I took them to dinner all the time and all this, but it was the idea it would be paid back by them." Judge: "You brought a child a birthday cake with the idea it would be paid back. Did you ever say that these things were loans and not gifts?" Him: "Well, no, but I shouldn't need to. That's the normal way people think." Judge: "Well, that's not the way I think. Case dismissed." Imagine having such a jaded view of your own kind of dating ability that you take precautions to do this kind of thing if people have the nerve to break up with you. Ugh. Relative of a retired prosecutor. Relative was working misdemeanor criminal court. Cases get called in alphabetical order, and 2 women named Catherine Smith and Catherine Smith, with a K, were scheduled to have their hearings before the judge. Not their actual names, but you get the point. Both had similar names, but slightly different. So the bailiff announces the next case to the courtroom. Catherine Smith, with a C, for 1 count of possession of white powder with the intention to sell, and 1 count of selling her body. So Catherine Smith, with a K, stands up and indignantly cries, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, just wait a second. Where the hell did the working girl charges come from? I may deal yayo, but I am not a working girl." Easiest illegal substance case my relative ever prosecuted. Actual lawyer here. From the Fool for a Client file. Was interning at Legal Services after 1L, doing discovery work for family law. My supervisor invited us to observe a hearing for our client, to get a restraining order against her husband. At the hearing, the client discussed various times he threatened her. The man, representing himself, interrupted and said, "Judge, I never said any of those things. If I had, she wouldn't be standing here." Restraining order granted. Not a lawyer, but here's a story from the burbs. My buddy's psycho neighbor built a wall too high and doesn't have proper drainage on his property for the very small creek/natural drainage in between their yards. My buddy hired an attorney as the psycho decided to sue him over it. My buddy's engineer looked over the property and noted not only did my buddy set his yard up right, but the neighbor created drainage problems. Neighbor hired his own engineer that proved my buddy was correct. Now the guy is likely to go postal. Case was going through to mediation. Since both engineers found fault with the psycho neighbor, my buddy decides he's going to take it to trial. Turned the tables a bit. I'm not a lawyer, but witnessed a pathologist win a case in court by destroying the defense's credibility. The question was over whether or not carbon monoxide poisoning could have caused certain signs of death in an individual, but the defense didn't study their chemistry very well and kept asking the pathologist whether carbon dioxide could have caused these signs. After thoroughly frustrating the defense by answering his questions incorrectly, the pathologist said very loudly, "Oh, I'm sorry, did you mean carbon monoxide? Because that's a completely different thing." Completely destroyed the defense's credibility in front of the jury. They were done after that. So I guess the opposing counsel screwed himself by not picking up a book. For clarification, this is not the only reason that lawyer didn't win. There were a lot of other things that didn't work out in his favor, but those were technical things that he probably knew about ahead of time. This was a case where he was asking questions that he thought were going to work out in his favor, but it worked out against him because he made a basic chemistry mistake that he honestly should have caught. Yeah, I know he's not a scientist, but you don't have to be a scientist to remember the difference between those two things. Getting terminology correct is a part of his job. It's not likely anyone caught a felony charge solely because he said that one thing wrong. A guy I used to work with was going through a messy divorce, about 20 years ago now. His soon-to-be ex-wife was a psycho, and her father was a psychologist, so he was pulling all of the strings. Even had my coworker arrested at work one day. Bullcrap charges. The divorce case took years, one young son involved, and at every turn my friend lost because of something the father filed for or another string he pulled. In the end, they were in court and it was very apparent that my friend was going to lose custody and all visitation rights. Every plea he entered was squashed and he was mentally broken. The judge asked the ex-wife if she had anything else to add, and she said she had a written statement that she wanted the judge to read. The bailiff took the paper from her and handed it to the judge, who unfolded the note and read it. He stopped for a minute and asked her if she was certain she wanted this note added to the case, and she said yes. The judge turned to my friend and said, paraphrasing, "Mr. Insert name here, all these years and all these claims that I ruled out against you, the court profusely apologizes. I did not believe you, but now I do. Ruling in your favor." Bangs the gavel. "I grant you full legal and physical custody of your minor child. Bailiff, please handcuff Miss Name here." My buddy was stunned that he won and happy at the same time. He later found out that the note said, "Give me my son, or I'll frickin' kill you." There you go, folks. Threaten the judge. That can only go well for you. You heard it here first. Not a lawyer, I know, but my parents were in a lawsuit where this happened. They owned a business, and on either side of it were other businesses. Their neighbors to the left sued us, claiming that they had been using their property without paying them or without permission, that we were essentially trying to adverse possess it. We got a surveyor to come in, and the surveyor said that not only were we using all of our property, but we had been paying rent to them on about 20 feet that was also our property. Obviously, they weren't happy, so they got their own surveyor, who gave us 50 feet. We won the lawsuit. Now, their little patch of property has a rusty fence all around it with keep out signs everywhere. It's about 20 by 10 feet. When I first started, my firm had me on a case where the client had claimed he lost because of ineffective assistance of counsel, basically saying that the old lawyer didn't do his job. So we prepare an argument based on not asking the right questions, not communicating, etc. We think it's going to be a tough case, but not unwinnable. Then we get the response to our complaint where the old lawyer argues that he was only ineffective because he didn't have time to prepare his case and only reviewed it the morning of the original trial. He had known about the case for months, by the way. The judge saw this, and during the trial, we had essentially asked, "Isn't this the definition of ineffective counsel? Not giving enough time to your client?" The silence from his side of the court was amazing. Needless to say, the trial didn't last much longer. Thanks, opposing counsel. I guess you were ineffective for both of you. Not a lawyer, but in a suit against an employee, her attorney presented our contract and their contract to demonstrate the differences to prove that his client hadn't stolen ours. Where did you get our contract? Idiots. We won. Spent a couple of $100,000, defendants both ordered to pay $10K, filed bankruptcy and dissolved business, started anew with another competitor. Life. Not my case, but I was in courtroom watching a trial. Self-representing defendant who was accused of flashing a guard and pleasuring himself till, well, you know. As a pro se defendant, he defended himself at trial without an attorney. Prosecutor was doing well proving the case. When the female deputy was on the stand, the defendant asked her one question. "If you saw me do what you claim I did, then how big is my member?" The deputy responded by raising her hands and estimating about 15 inches. The guy grinned, turned to the jury and said, "Yeah, that's right," and sat down. Obviously, he was convicted. He was doing a 10-year prison sentence, so this conviction wasn't of much consequence, but I'll never forget it. Oh, I've got one. I was about 5 when this happened, but my parents explained it years later. There were a series of trees on the sidewalk in front of each house on the street. Although they were not part of our yard, the tree was owned by my parents and they were responsible for it. Some guy tripped over a branch and was seriously injured. He came after my parents for all of the money. The dude showed up with a mountain of evidence: hospital bills, psychologists' testimonials, a photo montage of his slow and painful recovery, etc. Apparently, his lawyer brandished this stuff like a bat before court. My parents' lawyer thought he had a good case, until the first day of court, when he walked over with a picture and asked, "Is this your tree?" My parents looked at the photo in disbelief. No, that is actually not our tree." The opposing counsel repeated the question. It went back and forth a few times until my parents' lawyer incredulously produced a picture of their tree, which was, even to the untrained eye, a completely different tree. At that point, the opposing counsel whirled around and started screaming at his client, "You said that was their tree!" Case summarily dismissed. My parents walked out in shock, came home, and bought me ice cream. All's well that ends well. What is the most embarrassing way your body has betrayed you? I danced classical ballet for years when I was younger. One day when I was 12, we were doing a stretch where we were lying on our backs with our butts scooted to the wall and our legs stretched towards the ceiling. We would let our legs fall into the splits, letting gravity assist us. So we were lying there, listening to quiet piano music, my legs wide open, and the girl next to me was whispering jokes and making me giggle. I could feel the onslaught of explosive gas happening, but being young and stupid, I was afraid to close my legs because I thought I'd get into trouble. So I ripped the loudest, most terrifying toot to ever exist. I think I blew a hole in my little pink leotard, I swear to God. The room was a huge wooden studio, so that expulsion from hell was bouncing off the walls for like 15 minutes. All the little girls started screaming, I was screaming, the teacher was probably screaming. Still gives me nightmares. I stood up from sitting at work and screamed in pain because I got a cramp behind my nuts. I don't know how to explain it, but that's where I felt the pain. My co-workers were dying of laughter when I explained what my scream was. In 6th grade, I got hard for no reason and then was asked to go hand something to the teacher. When I stood up, this girl that sat near me stared right at my nethers with wide eyes. I'm just thankful she didn't tell anyone, or I might not have heard the end of it. Last summer, I tripped over something while walking on the sidewalk. Happens every now and then, no big deal. It normally just looks like a funny skip or something, except this time I kind of leaped forward into the air. And somehow the normal response message to put my hands before me didn't reach its destination, so I just dropped onto the ground like a human sack of potatoes. It was equally painful and embarrassing. Still don't know how the crap that happened. I was sitting on the floor in my cheap wooden condo and let out a huge guff of wind. Dog in the condo below me started barking, and I could hear the cute girl who lived there and her visiting parents laughing. A note from the narrator, this video has been a matter of spreading out the toot stories which, surprise, comprise the majority of accounts from this forum. Struggle on, my fellow gaseous humans. One time I was really sick. So I went to throw up in the toilet, and as I started throwing up, I simultaneously started pooping myself as well. Once you start throwing up, you can't exactly stop until you're done. So I just kept throwing up while crapping myself for the smelliest, most uncomfortable 5 minutes or so of my life. Ever since I stopped being able to throw up like a normal person, I'm always scared I'll crap myself, so I sit on the toilet bending over a bucket, even though it's harder to throw up that way. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this trip down memory lane as much as I did. When I was in high school, by starting a period without any of the usual symptoms and leaving a bloody puddle on the chair and huge stains on my jeans. This happened to me, and a boy I had a crush on told me about it, because I didn't realize. He asked me to go to the bathroom, he went to the admin office, got me a pair of track pants we used for PE, brought it to the bathroom, and got them to clean up the chair. Never told anyone that I know of. I was way too scared and embarrassed to ask him out or ever really talk to him again. In a meeting with my managers, they're complaining about X, Y, and Z that I haven't achieved. I'm not upset about the criticisms. If anything, I'm angry I have to hear them. But for some bizarre reason, my eyes started watering. We'd have these meetings weekly, and every time my eyes would water and tears would pour. It started just happening when I wasn't even angry. And even in normal angry situations, I'd never tear up. Just in those meetings. When I was 12, my best friend and I were hanging out in front of my apartment complex on the front step with two guys that we were super interested in. I was sitting on the top step with my bestie, and the two guys were goofing off farther down the steps and making us laugh. Well, I started laughing. So hard, in fact, that during one of those laughs where you're laughing so hard you're no longer making any noise, where you've basically lost control of it and can't stop, I started tooting really loudly. Even though I was mortified, I could not stop laughing and laughed harder, and then I started peeing my pants. I couldn't stop. The pee was running down the steps as I tried desperately to stop laughing by covering my ears and shutting my eyes. I finally gained control of my body and stopped laughing, but it was too late. My crush came over to sit next to me, and right before he sat down next to me, he saw the puddle of pee and jumped up in alarm and said, "Whoa!" I got up and tried to run inside, but I didn't have my key, so I had to ring the buzzer and had to wait for my mum to buzz me in front of them, with pee-soaked pants and the giant puddle of my pee that had run down half the steps. I stayed inside the rest of the day, and that night, my crush miraculously came back and asked me out through my bedroom window. Good God! How good was the joke that you experienced such a total loss of control? How did the trauma of your bodily evacuations not sober you up and stop you laughing? At least it seems to have humanized you enough for your crush to get brave enough to ask you out, so that's something. 2-hour train ride. I felt the air coming slowly, but I held it back until the end. Finally, the next stop was mine, so I stood up and walked to the door, still holding back that, now massive, amount of air in my colon. Just when the doors were about to open, some child stumbled into me from behind. It surprised me so much that I, just for a moment, didn't hold in. The result was the loudest, most disgusting butt blast you could ever imagine. I never left the train station faster in my entire life. Storytime. My grandmother was killed when she received the AIDS virus through a blood transfusion back in the day. Know that my grandma was the one that ate the bullet that makes hospitals screen blood. My family donates blood on her birthday. I hate donating blood. I hate needles, I hate seeing blood, and I hate the weird cold feeling you get through your entire arm. In a terrible twist of fate, I happen to have universal blood that is CMV negative. I can donate to babies and small children, which is apparently rare. Hospitals are always in short supply, it seems, as I am always getting calls to donate a double amount every time I'm eligible. I charge them twice as many cookies as they give to other people. One time, after giving a double dose, I was feeling just fine. I usually feel wiped out and need to go to sleep, but that day I was feeling fine. I got home and the wife was there, and we're trying to have a kid and we were both kind of flirty, so we went for it. I got in the buff when my knees wobbled, the room spun, and I just collapsed on the floor. I never lost consciousness, I was just sprawled naked on the floor, unable to lift my arms or legs. I could loll my head about. Don't try to have a romantic time after donating a double dose of blood. My husband was annoying me the other day, and I tried to toot on him, and I crapped myself. Not sure if it's just me, but if a girl is going to sit in my lap, I will get immediately hard. I don't go around trying to get girls to do this, but I have had a few insist and then call me out for being a pervert when I tried my best to persuade otherwise. Santa? Looks like you should change your name to Meat Uprising. When I inadvertently spit on the monitor when I'm trying to explain something to someone. Dislocated hip while having adult fun times. Twice. I once went to school when I felt really sick. Within 10 minutes of me being at my school, my stomach started cramping, and I informed the teacher I was going home. It's about a 10-minute drive with my bike. Every time I went over the littlest bump, my stomach started hurting really bad. Not even 2 minutes of me biking to my house, I stopped to throw up. I threw up so bad that I started crapping my pants. A lot. Some of my friends started driving by, but I don't think they noticed me. I call my dad, who didn't have any way of bringing me home. He did, however, have a scooter. He comes along and I tell him I need to go home, but not on the bike. He tells me there's no other way, so I get on the bike, with crap still in my pants, and we drive home together. Not being able to burp or toot when I want to, but becoming a grandmaster butt trumpeter when most inappropriate. Was hanging with my boyfriend at his parents' house and was in his room, and we were just being silly, and in a moment of silence, I tooted for the first time in front of him, super loud, and at that same moment his mum walked in and silently turned around and left. He starts laughing at my super shocked face and the situation, and then I let out another slow, drawn-out, loud toot. It was hilarious, but oh my gosh, it was embarrassing at the time. It only happened like maybe 6 weeks ago. Just look at my fricking username. Thank you for your contribution, dear username I only have one hand. Honestly, entirely my own fault, but I drank too much one night and had a 3-hour train ride the next morning while completely hungover and nauseous. While in the train, I felt the need to throw up coming again, so I stood up to move to the toilet on board. This new modern fancy train had automatic doors on the toilet, and I couldn't figure out where the button was to close them, so I'm frantically trying to figure it out while suppressing my vomiting as much as possible. This sweet old lady who was sitting near the toilets noticed my trouble and pointed out the button to me, so I thanked her and closed the door and went. Very audibly. I didn't dare to look her in the eye when I walked by in shame. Brain. Let's have a seizure. Bladder.
Awesome! This is as good a time as any to pee yourself in front of everyone.
I am 30 years old. Last year, I pooped my pants. Full on. It was traumatic, shameful, and embarrassing. Be skeptical about any sounds your guts are making, people. My girlfriend and I went out one night to our local bar that does a wing night every week. It's our favorite bar, but also one of the only bars open all winter in our beach town, and wing night being the most popular night, we had to wait for a table for a while. Usually, we get 1 beer each during weeknights, but that night we had a lot more while waiting for a table. So after quite a few beers, some hot wings, and a night of all settling, the next day it needed out. I was at work, just me, my boss, and the head of all the offices in my state, 5 offices. I took one of the biggest dumps of my life and clogged the toilet the worst I ever have. 20 minutes with the plunger, I had to admit defeat. I told my boss, which was embarrassing as hell because she's pretty attractive. She called some plumbers, but none of them could come out that day, so I went back for another 15 minutes trying to get it to flush. I called it again, and the 3 of us left early since we only have 1 toilet in the office. The plumber came the next morning and got it cleared. So long story short, I ate too many wings, drank too much beer, and cost the company $150 the next day to unclog a toilet. In the womb, my lungs said, "Screw you," and have yet to cooperate 2 decades later. It's really cute when I can bench press 60 pounds, I'm a petite female, but I need a break after 2 flights of stairs. At a movie night with some friends and girls in high school, I somehow coughed and sneezed at the same time, and a huge snot rocket flew out of my mouth and onto the blanket. Very rarely I am walking and either one of my legs will just give out for like half a second. It's never enough to fall or anything, but it does make me look like I don't know how to walk or that I may be drunk. When trying on an engagement ring in a jewelry store, my finger swelled so much that I couldn't get it off. Even with lube applied by the store, it wouldn't go down. The ring just seemed bonded to my finger. I still remember feeling embarrassed when the jeweler smiled and said, "It's a good sign. This engagement ring is already married to your finger." The ring was eventually removed by soaking my finger in ice water several times to reduce the swelling. I have irritable bowel syndrome and get really insanely distended stomach full of gas when I eat certain foods. It looks like there's a basketball under my skin and it's all gas. My boyfriend of a year or so knew about my IBS, but hadn't really experienced the worst of it. One day we were hanging out at my apartment and I had my big gas belly. He knew what that meant, so I excused myself to my room to try and toot some of it out. He decides to come in to show me something on his phone as I'm laying on my bed with my knees up, trying to coax the gas out. He starts laughing at the sight. I start laughing. I feel an epic release of gas coming and I try to tell him to leave ASAP, but I'm also laughing. Between the laughter and the position I was in, I couldn't hold it back. I let out the loudest, longest toot in history. At first he laughed in surprise, then as it kept going on and on, his face changed from laughter to surprise to shock, mixed with what looked like a twinge of sadness. Watching him go through so many emotions right on his face just made me laugh harder, so the toot just kept going. After what feels like an eternity, he steps out of the room, hands over his mouth. He comes back in, and the butt blast is finishing off with a final toot toot toot. He is speechless. The first thing he says is, "I feel like I lived 80 years, died, and then came back to life again before that toot ended. I just don't understand how it was so long and steady, and then it got all Louis Armstrong at the end." And that's how he started calling certain trumpety toots Louis. Also, we moved in together a few months later, so my butt performance didn't deter him too much. Well, ladies and gents, I told you there were going to be a lot of stories on bowel movements, but believe me when I say I have actually reduced their representation in this video compared to the original forum post. Was on holiday in Fiji a few years back with the missus. We were playing rugby with some younger kids down the beach, and I wasn't feeling the freshest from a few to too many tequilas the night before. Wearing nothing but sports shorts, I got past the ball, partially crapped myself/sharted, and then hit legs, like it was a race between me getting back to the room before it made its way completely down the back of my legs. Grabbed the room key from the chair our things were on, dropped the shorts, and ditched them midway up to the room, up the stairs and down the straight for what felt like a effing lifetime. One trying to secure my privates, while the other held the room key for dear life. All while politely saying "Bula" as I ran past everyone, somewhat covered in my own poop. Had a killer metabolism until 27. After that, I grew a belly even though my diet didn't change. I actually ate pretty healthy, and didn't drink alcohol, sober for 8 years, and exercised pretty regularly. I can blame my dad's genes for that, even though my mum's side of the family is as skinny as a rail. I was standing in the checkout line at Target getting myself a drink and a little snack because I hadn't eaten anything yet that day, and started feeling kinda crappy because of it. I got in the shortest line, and then my mum and daughter started talking to the cashier about how something should have been on sale. My hearing starts getting staticky, and my vision is getting dark, and I'm bracing myself on the conveyor belt, just trying to breathe and play it cool. Mum and the cashier keep talking about the coupon, and I'm thinking to myself, dear God, how embarrassing. If they have to call an ambulance and I'm taken out of this place on a stretcher, I can never come to this Target again. So they keep talking, and I just decide to sit down on the floor because that's just what you do. And I'm sitting there with my head on my knees when this manager walks up and in a kind of angry, confused tone, asks me if I was okay, and I stand up and tell her, "Oh, yeah, I'm fine," and play it off to avoid drawing any further attention from myself. I check out, take my stuff and sit in my car in a cold sweat, and realize I had never fainted before in my life, and that I can never go to that Target again. On the bus, 2 hot girls in front of me, I fell asleep and woke myself up with a really loud moan that sounded like, Didn't get laid. I didn't know what healthy eating was and ate as much as I could when I was a teenager. Now I have huge stretch marks for life. I can't go shirtless without feeling embarrassed. Dude, nobody on the planet, male or female, thinks stretch marks are horrible or unattractive. I speak for all of us when I say most of us don't notice, and the ones who do notice don't care at all. Getting whiskey wee-wee when hooking up with a smoking hot girl I knew. Had testicular torsion in the middle of performing a one-act play. Worst night ever. I coughed at work, which made my butt constrict, which tore open a hemorrhoid, which proceeded to soak blood through my pants. Had to leave work early that day. Friends, exploded butt isn't fun. Every time I get nervous or am in a bad and serious situation, I smile. Was working out at the gym a couple of years ago and decided to go do wind sprints on the basketball court. The basketball court is actually 4 courts lined up side by side with a walking and running track on the second floor looking down on it. This particular morning, the track was busy. After doing a couple of sprints, I noticed a basketball lying about 1/4 of the way down the court. So I, being all cool and stuff, started another sprint and bent down to grab the ball so I could scoop it up, dribble, and do a layup on the way down the court. My middle-aged, dumb self sprinted down the court, bent down and grabbed the ball, but was unable to correct to a standing position, so my momentum carried me to the ground where I slid on my stomach for what seemed like an eternity in front of all these people on the track above. To my credit, I got up and finished the layup. Middle age ain't fun, kids. Being pregnant and peeing myself a little every time I sneeze. First time hooking up with this guy I'd been lusting after for a while. No clue he was into it too, so double yay. Some, or all of, the drinks were had, and as a result my body completely refused to cooperate. No matter how into it I was in my head, or all he did to get me going, which was a lot and felt awesome, my lady flower stayed drier than the Sahara Desert. Late in my pregnancy, my body began producing a lot of relaxin, so my hips would constantly fall out of place. If I sat crisscross applesauce too long or sat with my hips below my knees for too long, I couldn't get up or walk for several minutes without help. So imagine my fury when I'm sitting on the couch eating some ice cream and my husband rips the foulest butt gas known to man and I can't effing escape. By growing a lump in my right testicle. Now I've had 3 strangers, read doctors, touch my nuts in the past 5 days, and I can still smell the lube from the ultrasound. Surgery is scheduled in 2 days to get the testicle removed. It's not ideal, but it's better than the alternative. I have to say the most embarrassing part is bringing it up to family, friends, and co-workers to keep them in the loop. I assure you no one wants to talk about your balls, especially removing one. My own father clams up and hasn't reacted at all like I thought he would. I go back and forth between being incredibly transparent and then shy or ashamed. Touch your bits, everyone. It could save your life. I believe either grade 4 or 5 it was my turn to present my space poster I made up. After a minute of talking about what I've done and learned, I unleash an ungodly sneeze. Wasn't a little boy, "Achoo!" This bad boy was something a grown dad would do. This sneeze has me standing in front of my class with 2 massive streaks of snot dangling out each nostril hanging by my chin. I'm very prone to nosebleeds that range from paper-cut amounts of blood to full-blown severed artery amount. Typically, they come along randomly during the early parts of November when heating units are turned on and the air is especially dry. Anywho, I wait tables for a living at a fancy restaurant, so this can be an especially problematic few weeks as they can pop up randomly while chatting with a table. One night, I had a couple in from out of town who declined drinks because they were so hungover from the night before. I mentioned that I was also having a rough day from the previous night, and we shared an empathetic laugh with each other. My nose then started to bleed rather badly, resulting in the table thinking their server was a heavy user of white powder.
Men of Reddit, who have found out their child isn't actually theirs? How did you react and how are things now? When I was in the Navy, I had an on-again, off-again relationship with a girl back home. On my last deployment, my girlfriend told me via email that she was knocked up. I accepted it, emailed my parents, told the military, all that jazz. I ended up getting discharged, so I went back home and took care of my pregnant girlfriend. She had the baby, and I thought I was the father for 5 months, while she was on vacation with a girlfriend. While she was gone, I got an email from her boyfriend telling me that they had been together for the last 4 months, and also for the week in Myrtle Beach I was bankrolling. After that, I got the paternity test, found out it wasn't mine, and told her I was done and wanted no contact. Crappy part is, my parents still babysit and treat the kid like their grandkid, so she's at a lot of family functions and such. Also, the guy wasn't even the father. Forget her. I had a fiancé. We were supposed to be getting married. Then she went on a holiday by herself because she just needed to get away. She came back pregnant to an unemployed heroin user. I had a job and an apartment. She told me, "You've never done anything to prove you really loved me. Now's your chance. Accept me and the baby." No thanks. Last I heard of her, she's an unmarried mother of 2, and forget her. This one's a long one, so be ready for that. 2 years of DNA tests that the state continually reported as inconclusive. It led to going someplace out of state. Got it done. Got the test results back. Less than 2% probability of genetic match. Huh. So, I called her up. Asked, "So, you want to tell me what the real story is?" 2 weeks before we had our night under the sheets that resulted in the talk 9 months later, her father had come home drunk out of his mind and forced himself upon her. I still recall the tone of her voice asking me if I had actually taken the test and that it was real. Well, turns out her mother heard that conversation, notified someone, and dad took a DNA test. So her dad is the dad of her kid. And I felt horrible for her. I can't even joke about this. Her dad was arrested. The kid, last I heard, was doing well. It forced her to clean up her act. She'd gone in for heavy drug and alcohol use, and it drove us apart before the child did. And that was 10 or so years ago. We don't talk. Every once in a while I'll think about the kid, but I don't know. This world ain't a nice place, and with all the crap she'd gone through, I wasn't going to make it worse. So I left it alone. From what little I heard from mutual friends over the years, apparently Dad came out of prison 3 years later a Bible guy. This all took place in Texas, by the way. Supposedly he was doing his best to support her and whatnot, but there was some kind of falling out and she moved out and in with one of her girlfriends up in Dallas. I can't even fathom it, to be honest. I still consider the man to be scum-sucking trash for putting his daughter through all that, and I can't exactly fault her at all for her literally wanting me to be the father. She was so hoping that it was the case because it reviled her. The sobbing on the phone when the realization hit was shattering. I remember being on the phone for hours, most of it her crying. I recall my mom after the fact telling me I should have sued her. In my mind, it was done. I had 2 years of my life interspersed with phone calls, genetic testing visits, even bounty hunters showing up at my door in place of work serving me with notices from her family to show up or else. She had to raise this kid with her crappy father the whole time being ignorant. All that time? It's awful. A lot of you asked why I left her, why she didn't get an abortion, etc. First of all, when she had originally called me and we had the talk 9 months later, I asked her what she wanted to do. Originally, she wanted to abort it. This was back in 2003-2004, so access to clinics was readily available. I asked if that's what she really wanted. She insisted, and I had sent her a money order to help pay for it. She never got the abortion. I originally got a story. She went in, took the pill they gave her, and it made her so sick she left. I was 22 to 23 and didn't really know anything about how they do abortions. What we learned in high school involved either the scrape or the vacuum cleaner methods, so I took her word for it. Sometime later, she went to the courts, at her family's insistence, and wanted me to provide child support, and that's when I had the choice to either pay for it or get the testing. Talking it out with my parents, because if I knew what I was doing, I decided on getting the test done. If I was going to pay for it, best to make sure I was the one who should have been responsible. At this point in our relationship, it had been about a year since that night we got down and dirty, and broke up about 3 to 4 months after that night. I had moved back home with my parents. The job I had in Houston went out of business. I was out of money and had no other options. We broke up due to her frequent alcohol and drug usage. I never understood the need for anyone to get completely wasted on alcohol. 1 to 2 drinks? Fine. Smoke some dope? It's fine. Cocaine? What the heck? No. So I ended it. And this was all before I'd even learned she was pregnant. The first test, for whatever reason, took dang near 6 months before anyone heard anything. The results came back inconclusive. I never got any more information than that, so either something happened at the lab or I don't know. I wound up getting referred to a place about an hour away from my parents and went there to get it all done. So by the time 2 years since that night of conception rolled around, we finally had the results in. I remember opening the envelope and looking the sheet over. A lot of it I didn't understand. I did see less than 2% chance of genetic match. I called the number at the top of the form and spoke to a woman, provided the info, and she took me through it. There was absolutely no way I could be the father. Now, I'll admit, I was elated at first. I thanked the woman, hung up, and looked at my cell. I had to call her. And reality set in. I called her. After all the crying and admissions, I asked what really happened the day she claimed she went in for the abortion. On her way to the clinic, she said something inside her clicked, and she wanted to keep it. The roughly $600 I had sent, she used it for clothes and stuff for the baby. I asked why she couldn't have just been honest from the start, and the results of the test were why. Some of you asked why I didn't become the child's father, because I wasn't ready for it at that point in my life. 23 years old, no job, no prospects, thousands of miles gone, and I never got along with her family. It wouldn't have been good for either of us. In the end, we agreed not to be angry with one another. She was mad at her father though. I don't know if that ever went away, though I highly doubt it did. Also, I wasn't ripping on Texas. I actually really like Texas. The people are friendly. I simply wanted to provide some geolocation to what happened is all. I spent 2 years living in Houston working for a local IT firm. Met a lot of great people, had some amazing barbecue. Seriously, it's like you can't go 2 blocks without hitting a barbecue joint that doesn't rock. And met some folks who were religious but not Bible-thumping nuts. As far as sex criminals go, only ever met the one, and you're reading about it. So that's it. Let's go with something a little bit lighter this time around, shall we? I have a mixed-race child. Originally was told it was mine until she actually gave birth. Since she was mixed, she came out pretty light-skinned. Very light-skinned, actually. But as she got older, her skin got darker and darker. Let the mother stick around for about 1 year to 2 years. She wasn't from where we were living and didn't have anywhere else to go. Didn't want to kick baby out into the streets. Finally, I had enough of her and kicked her out. But I ended up getting attached to the little girl. Fast forward 2 years and I'm single, lonely, depressed, and missing the little girl. I've had no contact with them. Through the grapevine, I hear my little girl's real dad has nothing to do with her. No contact, no father. From the story I get, the real dad was married and refused her. I set up a meeting with my little girl after 2 years to get a feeling on the situation, and it was like those 2 years never happened. She ran up to me like she just saw me yesterday. I talked to the mother and I said that I'll take care of her. We never went to court. No child support has ever been filed. We don't fight about anything. I tell her if she needs anything as far as money or clothes, whatever, I'll take care of it. She's now 10, I'm married. My wife accepts her with open arms and loves her like I do. She's an awesome kid, great student, no troubles. I have to teach her a bit of humility because all she's concerned about is being beautiful. But if that's my biggest worry with her, I think that's okay. I wouldn't change anything at all. I will tell you one thing. I live in the South and you would think that a married white couple with 2 normal white kids and an older mixed girl, one would think you get more looks from white folks. Surprisingly, it's the black folks that give us more WTF looks than anything. But like I said, I wouldn't trade her for anything. I love that silly girl. So I'm on the other side of the fence. Basically, I'm dating this girl for about 3 years. Rocky relationship and all that jazz. I break up with her and move back to my hometown for a period. While back, she asked if she can come visit. First mistake, but believe me, intimacy was really golden between us. Anyway, 2 months after the visit, she's pregnant. Not the best news in the world, but I'm from a family of certain values on these matters, so I own up. After spending a week with her and discussing what to do, I go back home and start to prepare stuff. 3 days later, she calls and claims a miscarriage, and we sort of end it and it dies out in the next few weeks. Fast forward 7 months, and I move back to the same city, capital of Norway, Oslo, and continue my career. Suddenly, I see a Facebook post about this girl getting a child, 9 months and 2 days after her visit. It turns out she had been dating another dude for the whole 3 years we had been dating. They even lived together for 2 of the years. She kind of just decided that she felt better with him as the dad. So basically, she convinced him he was the dad. So he announced to the whole world and was just about to go on fatherly leave when I found out. I quietly asked her for a paternity test, and to no surprise, it stated with 99.99% certainty that I'm the father. Crap's unraveling, he's not happy, obviously, and has to tell the world that nope, just kidding, I'm not a dad. Anyway, 4 years later, it's all good, and we have 50% shared custody, but dang, it was a few funky months in the start. After some questions and stuff, yes, I did spend time at her apartment. She had me over every time the other guy was away and such. She also fake moved into my apartment for 6 months. Not a man, never been in this situation, but I am the child of one of these situations, so I thought I'd chime in. TLDR, Mom stayed with her husband at first, and he is legally my father. But my dad decided he wanted to stay in the picture, so my mom eventually married him, and I have 2 dads. My mom got married when she was 17 and had 3 sons with her first husband. I'm gonna call him Ben. They were together for a long time, I think about 18 years total. Somewhere along the way, she realized she was caught in a loveless marriage, but couldn't really do anything about it. My dad, who I'll call Dave, moved in across the street and the 2 of them started spending time together, and she started an affair with him. They weren't careful enough, and next thing you know, my mom is pregnant with me. She knew from the get-go I wasn't Ben's, and he kind of had an idea too because they weren't intimate that often and the math didn't work out. But I think he went along with it just because he didn't want to think about what she was doing behind his back. My dad initially didn't want to have anything to do with me, so when I was born, they put down her husband's name on my birth certificate as the father and called it a day. Paternity tests were done though, and my mom confirmed what she already knew. Sorry, around here my details get a little fuzzy because my mom still hasn't given me a full and complete story. Dave still definitely didn't want to stick with my mom and I, and it was just agreed that Ben would raise me as his, and they would forget it happened. He was and is a great guy, and an awesome dad. Now the way I've heard it is Dave, despite his convictions, couldn't stay away because he loved my mom so much, and once he laid eyes on me, he was head over heels. Some of my earliest memories are going to visit him in his apartment. At some point between the time I was 2 and the time I was 3, my mom and Ben divorced. I don't remember it and was kept largely out of it, but I understand it was very messy. Because I was legally Ben's daughter, I got the same visitations as my other brothers who were still under 18. My mom and Dave married when I was 4, and Dave was never happy about these visits, but I was because I loved Ben so much. Ben was always daddy, Dave was dad. It was understood, and I never confused the two or made reference to one being my parent in front of the other. Even as a 4- and 5-year-old, I knew the sensitive nature of the situation. It was never confusing either, because they really are 2 very different people who I think provided me with a great balance of paternal figures in my life. Like I said, Ben was always daddy, sweet, endearing, with the heart of gold who just wanted his little girl to be happy and would spoil her rotten to see her smile and make stupid jokes to get a giggle out of her. Dave was dad, still kind and loved me to death, but more of the disciplinarian who I knew not to mess with. My mom's not married to either of them now, another long-winded story entirely, but I consider both of them to be my father, and I consider both of them to have done the best job they could have, and I think I turned out alright. My boyfriend's daughter is not his. He broke his hand on a door when he found out, but he never once denied her. He is on her birth certificate, has his last name, the whole 9 yards. She is his baby girl and he is her daddy. End of story. His ex-wife still likes to hold it above his head though. If you don't do XYZ, I'm getting a DNA test on baby and you'll never see her again. Burns me up. Throwaway account for reasons. I was 16 and in high school when I was dating this girl who was my first love. We will call her Kay. Kay and I were intimate roughly 3 months before homecoming. We had only been dating for a few weeks prior to that. Being a hormonal teenager was a nice mix with a girl that was willing to put out. Things go by as they usually do. We still see each other and screw like rabbits. However, Kay was also hanging out with this other guy named Derek every time she wasn't around me. My best friend Matt starts telling me that he's seeing them hold hands and making up at the art room, etc. Sure as heck, I catch them in the middle of a hot and heavy session, but being the dumb kid that I was, I forgave her. A few days later, she tells me she hasn't had her period in the last 2 months. Eventually, we try to keep things on the down low until the day of homecoming, and by the time we're taking pictures, with my whole family around, of course, she announces that she's pregnant. So begins a spiral of madness for the next 7 months. After one last night of fun at our homecoming dance, we start discussing what we need to do in order to prepare for the baby. I start applying for jobs, pretty much taking in the fact that my life is in order. No more fun for me now. We make preparations to get an apartment to provide for the kid. My folks are angry at me, not talking to me until they had to. The rumors around the school are crazy. What makes it worse is that most of them were accusing me of forcing myself onto Kay. Even my friends believed it. The rumor went out that I had forced myself on her with no protection and had my way with her. It got so out of hand that counselors would call me in daily to make sure that I was of sound mind. Being accused for being a sex criminal was insane for being 16, and I wouldn't ever wish that on anyone. It all blew up when I caught Kay sexting my best friend Matt. That's when I started thinking that something was up. I know, I was a freaking idiot. About 2 weeks after, she breaks up with me and starts dating Matt. She starts calling me and texting me, calling me a sex criminal and a piece of crap lowlife. Even though she said these things, she still loved me and wanted to support our kid. I really start having a mental breakdown, knowing that I can't trust anyone. Heck, even thought about eating a bullet just to end it all. I had no one. My folks moved me to a different school to hope that I could start fresh, but despite this, the torment goes on until her delivery date. My whole family is there and the hospital and my stomach is in knots. I can't breathe. This was the night that my adult life would begin. Hours pass and she finally goes through her contractions and the baby is born. The baby comes out to be black. I wish I was joking, and I know how insane this all sounds. The worst part is that my best friend Matt was black. The sheer horror on Kay's face is something that I will never forget and something that I will never forgive. Immediately, I go for a DNA test, and a few weeks later, it comes back that it's not mine. My friend Matt was screwing my girlfriend behind my back the entire time. My whole high school and teenage years were ruined because these people couldn't tell the truth. Back in college, I was seeing a girl for a while. Kinda serious, more so for her than me apparently. She winds up pregnant. I was young, didn't really know what to do, but knew if it was mine, I would do the right thing and be the father. Major caveat, I have a physical condition that makes it highly unlikely that I can actually get anyone knocked up, and she knew this. Long story and possible identifying info, so I'm leaving the details out. Anyway, she swears up and down through the whole pregnancy that it could only be mine, so I went along with it. I was out of town the weekend the kiddo was born. She apparently tried to reach me, but this was long before cell phones, and I had gone home to a different city with a college friend to party, and in all likelihood avoided home during that time frame, since I was reasonably sure it wasn't mine. Kiddo was born, I went to see them a few times over the next few weeks, and then shortly after that, they get called by my folks that she had stopped by their house and introduced it to them as their new grandson. They were ecstatic and happy for me, and all the fun stuff they anticipated about being new grandparents. I had to basically put the brakes on real hard at that point and tell them I was pretty sure that it was not my kid. I pretty much knew after I saw it. One look at it, and there was just no connection at all. It was a baby, but I saw nothing there that I recognized as mine in any way, shape, or form. Due to the fact that she was already on the dole, the state mandated a paternity test. I figured I just might as well get it over with and showed up for the appointment when they told me to. Once the results came back, there was a less than 1% chance it was mine. I turned around, never looked back. Only saw her twice since then, and it's been 20 plus years now, but both times she was almost in tears trying to apologize for doing that to me back then. I heard through the grapevine who ended up being the actual father, and he already had a few bastards running around, so he was no help to them at all. Not only that, but his poor health and drug issues put him in an early grave, so that poor kid had no father figure growing up. Thankfully, I kept a level head through the whole ordeal, and even got a letter of commendation from the county prosecutor's office saying that they wished even half the potential fathers were half as cooperative as I had been. TLDR, if you're gonna try and pin a kid on someone, make sure it's theirs if there's going to be a mandatory DNA test. Didn't make it that far, but had a little fling with a girl who I was honest and up in front with. It was a fling, and it wasn't gonna be serious. She agreed to it. So one time we were getting it on. Protection broke. I told her and she didn't seem to worry. Mind you, this was way before climax when I noticed. Also, I made sure there was no pre-emission. I had that when I put the new one on. Made sure that everything was good afterwards. Fast forward a couple weeks and she messages me saying she's preggo. I admit my heart jumped a little, but I called her calm as a British bloke drinking tea. She was so surprised that she asked why I wasn't freaking out and getting angry or panicking. Truth is, I knew that the likelihood of her being pregnant was very slim, and either way, I would man up no matter what. I asked her all the details. Was I the only one? Have you been drinking since the last time? And all that good stuff. I told her I wasn't ready for that, but the ultimate decision was hers to make. She started saying how she would never do such a thing, and I still stayed calm, told her we would talk in the morning. I was just meeting up with my boys to go party. She was shocked even more that I was still so calm and started asking where I was going because she was going out with her friends too. I didn't tell her. After that, I knew for sure she was trying to push my buttons. So the next day I spoke to her, she tells me she has to think about it. I said, take your time. Eventually, a few days later, she said she's not going to keep it and that she booked an appointment with her doctor who was in another city and over an hour away. She doesn't drive, and so I offered to give her a ride. She declined and said a friend would give her one. She said all she could to convince me that I don't need to go with her, so I backed off. I know where she worked, and she worked all day the day she was supposed to go, but she messaged me saying that she went and then she couldn't walk properly after. I played along and never spoke to her again. Mad props to this guy for having an iron will. I was dating a girl for 3 years who I had trusted. I was 18 at the time. She got pregnant. I was relatively safe, but everybody has slip-ups. I took my lumps and agreed to fatherhood and did the best I could. During the entirety of the pregnancy, she was pretty absent. She wouldn't talk to me much, sometimes for months at a time. I thought this was odd. It frustrated me beyond belief. Anyway, so later on a friend of hers started to work with me. He started to hook up with one of my coworkers. She told me he knew my GF and I was thinking, oh cool, interesting. Then she told me he banged my GF within the last year. I was mad. I called her up and talked with her. Apparently they did screw when we were on some break. This was entirely made up. The timing didn't match up with the pregnancy though, so I continued on my way to fatherhood with this soon-to-be mother that was all over the place. Eventually, she gave birth to a little girl. I wasn't there at the birth because I wasn't told it was happening. A couple of months down the road of trying to contact her, she let me see my girl. It was great. We started talking again and acting like parents. Well, just to make sure that this new baby girl was mine, I went ahead and had a paternity test. She was a 1% match, and therefore was not my daughter. I was appalled. I went to her place and asked her what this was about. She swore up and down it had to be mine. DNA is DNA. She wasn't my little girl after all. I left her, on her knees crying for me to come back to her apartment. I got a text later that day. She told me she remembered. She got blackout drunk and screwed this guy at a party. She claimed he basically forced himself upon her. I don't believe this at all. So I went through 9 months of a pregnancy and 3 months of actual fatherhood before I found out. Now I don't talk to her at all. I hear rumors occasionally about her, but I am so glad she is no longer in my life. TLDR, screw that woman.
What's the most, what the F moment with your siblings? When I was younger, I was playing outside when I heard my little brother giggling like a maniac around the other side of the house in the backyard. I went to see what was going on, and he was gleefully peeing into my dog's open mouth as the dog was lapping it up while dangerously close to his doodle. As a bonus story, I'll tell you about the time my brother almost caught me smoking when I was in high school. There is a barn across from a small pond by my house, and one winter my friend Murph and I were sparking up in the upper floor. We hear the dogs get let outside and someone mumbling, and we peek out the window so that we can keep tabs on whoever was outside now. My little brother is walking toward the frozen pond with a pickaxe and then begins to break apart the ice. After he's chopped it up a bit, he crouches down like a goddamn monkey, takes a chunk of pond ice and begins eating it while looking back and forth to make sure nothing sneaked up on him while he ate. It was like watching the gosh darn Nature Channel. In fact, okay, let's talk about my stepbrother for a second. Not many stories I can make into something of length, so I'll just do snippets. He brought a blank Uzi over to my house and asked me if he could fire it out the room of my window. I told him, no, it's going to sound like you're firing a fricking gun, and he did it anyway, and then he came back later saying, I told him we were popping balloons, with a smug smile on his face. He once offered me $100 to blow up a weather balloon in my room until it popped. I declined. In the dead of winter, he propped a ladder against my roof and then army crawled up the icy shingles with 2 butter knives as climbing tools, and then began pounding on my window to let him in 'cause it's cold outside. He bought one of those hoverboards, lit 2 smoke bombs, and rode it while spinning in circles as I filmed him until he started coughing so bad he couldn't keep going. He regularly buys designer clothes like polo shirts and Nike shoes and the like. These clothes usually look stupid as hell, like the white polo he brought with a giant tree with a sun behind it. often giving them to me after a week because, nah man, I don't want these, what was I thinking? One time he asked me to drive him to Plato's Closet to sell off 2 duffel bags full of stuff like this. I'll never forget his gangster swagger walking back to my car and him proudly announcing, "Man, I got $20. He once was trying to convince me to help him put a trampoline on the roof so he could use it to jump off said roof into the pond nearby. Took a lot of convincing to explain that he wouldn't make a jump that far. Afterwards, he wanted to have the trampoline on the ground instead. Then I had to explain how the best case scenario he simply misses and hurts himself, but more likely he'd go right through it and break his legs. The roof is on the 2nd story of the house, on that side of the yard. I think a few of us can sympathize with having a younger sibling that we were about 50% sure would grow up to become some sort of mass murderer or in an asylum later in life. This is just a particularly striking example. My sister used to sleepwalk into my room and just stare at me with a soulless murder glare. It was scary. This one time I was asleep and my little bro walked in and just got into bed with me. I was like, "Bro, what are you doing? This isn't your bed." To which he responds, "I think I know what I'm doing," and fell asleep instantly. I said, "F it," and went to sleep in his bed. I was winning a watermelon eating contest. My sister, realizing she could never beat me, picked up her half-eaten watermelon and bashed me in the back of the head with it, knocking me out cold. Did she actually use your loss of consciousness to catch up and eat more watermelon than you? Because if not, technically, you still won because you were leading prohibitively at the suspension of play caused by the injury. I haven't reviewed the most recent update on the official international watermelon eating competition rules, but I will put this in my pocket and start calling it a win. I've shared this before, but it seems applicable here. One time I walked past the bathroom to get to my room. My brother had left the door open and was standing on the toilet seat, waiting for me to pass. As he sees me, he exclaims, "This is how a man takes a dump," makes a loud noise and drops a thick log right in front of my eyes. I had just finished riding my bike home from a friend's place to see my mum pull into the driveway. Out of the other side of the car, my sister's head popped out. She had been off to college and I didn't expect to see her. My first thought, which I openly said because I was a little crap, was, "Why's sis home? She get knocked up in college?" Out steps my very pregnant sister. It was a rare double what the frick moment, as I was surprised to see her that fricking pregnant, and both my sister and mum were shocked at my accurate joke guess. And inappropriate guess, to be fair.
Sort of similar thing happened to me. I texted my cousin on her 20th birthday, "Congratulations, you avoided teenage pregnancy." Turns out she had just found out she had gotten knocked up and hadn't told anybody yet.
Studies have shown that incidents of teenage pregnancy drop off significantly after age 20. My brother, directly after the funeral, stole our uncle's war medals from his bedroom. His wife found out, told me and my mother, and then my mother made me sneak them back in. I like that this is as much of a mother story as it is a sibling story. Good stealthy evasion of the family shame, Mum. My girlfriend's brother called. They never talk, it's a distant and strained relationship, and she looks at me like, "Why the F is he calling?" I joked, "He's calling to tell you he's getting married." She tells me to shut up. A few minutes later, she comes back, "He's getting married." I joked again, "I guess he knocked this girl up." She says no. A few days later, the pregnancy announcement is up on Facebook. Sometimes jokes hit too close to home. Now we've got to sit through an awkward wedding pretending everybody else is happy about this. They're not. To clarify, the couple to be married is happy about it, or so he insists. Nobody else is happy, though. Everybody feels like this is a huge mistake, especially considering this girl has gone out of her way to meet his mother once, living in the same town, and they both live with their parents still and have known each other less than a year, and been dating less than that. Maybe we're all just cynical buttholes, and these two have the key to… Who am I kidding? I give it 6 years. I was out on a car ride with my dad and we arrived back at the house at like 3 a.m. My front door opens straight into my kitchen and I throw open the door expecting an empty kitchen only to see my brother butt naked standing in front of the sink. I screamed, "Why the F are you naked?" He scrambled back to the shower. Apparently he was mid-shower, his back hurt, so he went to the kitchen to start heating water for a hot water bottle for his back, and just stopped to have a snack or something while waiting for the water to boil, all while leaving the shower running. My dad still laughs about it. And yes, 3 a.m. My family keep odd hours, especially back when we were at school and it was summer break. My sister logged into my RuneScape account and finished the Dragon Slayer quest that 10-year-old me with limited playtime had spent months to gear up for. I was devastated. I was sitting in front of the television one day when my sister walked up behind me. She threw a little bouncy ball at me, but it bounced off my head, hit the television, bounced back off my head, and back at her. She was so surprised that it was such a perfect shot that she decided to try again to repeat it. I was so happy that my sister was playing with me that I sit there as she throws this ball at my head, trying to repeat the shot for like half an hour. Once I was taking a leak and my brother barges in, starts peeing, and yells, "2 players!" My family decided to spend Christmas in Mexico at an all-inclusive resort after I had moved across the country for work. My siblings and I were sharing a room. One night, my brother gets in late from drinking. I wake up and see him standing over my luggage. I say, "What the frick are you doing?" He says, "Taking a frickin' leak." He was. I was furious. He never really did apologize. My sister cut my hangy-down thingy that connects my upper lip with my gums with a pair of scissors while I was asleep. The internet tells me this is called a frenulum. We were not the best of friends growing up. One comment reads, "Ah!" I knew I'd find a logical response here somewhere. Watching TV with my older sister. She gets up, walks over to the house phone, and picks it up. "Hello?" she said. "Yes, he is. One moment." She covers the microphone. "It's for you, insert name here." Crazy. I didn't hear it ring, I think to myself. I walk to the phone. My sister begins savagely beating me with the corded phone. For no reason. She concocted a ruse just to beat me with the phone. Interesting. Is she single? When I was 16, I went with my family to visit my grandfather at the old folks' home. Well, I ended up striking up a conversation with another guy there who had an Irish accent. After a few minutes, my then 7-year-old brother asks this guy, "Why are you talking Mexican?" He just laughed, but I was so embarrassed that I didn't know how to react. When I was about 4, my parents told my brother, aged 13, to take my sister and I for a walk for an hour. I think my parents wanted some private time. He took us for a walk, all right. We were gone for 12 hours. My parents were frantic and the police were looking for us. God knows what he was thinking, but he's always been a bit of an idiot. My sister discovered her inner thinking voice when she was about 4. She came downstairs into the kitchen, totally distraught, and said, "Who is talking to me all the time? Everywhere I go, someone talks to me about the things I do, but I can't see anybody." We're all taking it for granted here that the sister in question has an inner monologue and isn't in fact crazy or hearing ghosts. Came downstairs from being asleep. Living room in disarray. Blood drops are on the floor, and I see little flecks here and there on the wall. I said to my girlfriend, "What the frick happened?" Concerned someone got injured or something. "Your brothers had a scissor fight," she tells me. A scissor fight. Yes, those 2 fricking brain surgeons took up craft scissors and went at each other in my living room, while my no doubt horrified girlfriend watched in shock and awe. They were gone by the time I woke up, thank God, but the evidence was hard to miss. I was this close to beating M. Bison in Street Fighter 2, and my big brother pulled the plug because he wanted me out of the room to smoke herb with his buddies. A case of justifiable fratricide if I ever did hear one. What an idiot. That's setting you up perfectly to rat him out to your parents. Well, strangely, and by an odd coincidence, he was found out the very next day. Told my sister to come inside for dinner. She was hitting balls down our driveway with a field hockey stick. She immediately turned and swung full force into my face, breaking my nose and deviating my septum. That was 20 years ago, and she won't talk to me because I've wronged her in the past. B-word, I can't breathe out my right nostril. My brother and I used to share a room when we were kids. One day, I woke up and saw my brother standing in the middle of the room trying to mount a toy gun on his member. Hey, sometimes you need protection. Probably when I was 9 and my older brother was 13. We were home watching TV one day during the summer. He was flipping through channels and stopped on an episode of Donahue that featured a male stripper right in the middle of his routine, with an audience of middle-aged women cheering. He put the remote down and excitedly said, "Oh, we're watching this." He's now married with 2 kids and is aspiring to be a Baptist minister. I tell this story anytime I get a chance to embarrass my brother. I was about 9, making him about 6. Thanksgiving dinner at our grandparents' house. We were both in the kitchen together, just the 2 of us, each with a slice of pumpkin pie.
My little brother grabs the salt shaker from the table, slowly unscrews the cap, dumps the entire shaker of salt on his pie, and eats the whole thing, making eye contact with me the whole time. He had this look like he knew what he was doing, so I didn't question it. 20 minutes later, he's chasing a cousin through the hall. He dead stops, says, "Uh-oh," and projectile vomits all over the walls and floor. He is descended upon by adults asking him what the matter is. His response? Too much salt. I was the only one who knew what he meant. It was pretty awkward when he knocked on my bedroom door to give me condoms when my boyfriend was over, but also very nice of him to be worried about me like that. The "what the F" moment comes from his girlfriend later that day, sharing with me, "I know you probably don't want to know this, but your brother's eggplant is huge." I super did not want to know that. F you, Shannon. My poor brother shares your pain. He had a party at our place when I was 18, and me and my then boyfriend were there, and then boyfriend gets really drunk, walks up to my brother and says, "Hey, I'm probably gonna sleep with your sister tonight." Spoiler, he then went upstairs and passed out in bed, alone. My brother still makes fun of me and cringes at that to this day. When I was young, about 13, my family was leaving my grandparents' house after a weekend visit. It was a long drive home, about 4 hours. I had to pee really bad and my parents hated stopping. So I discreetly grabbed my empty Mountain Dew bottle and emptied my bladder into it. It wasn't hard to hide being in the back seat of an SUV. Well, I put it under the seat after I was finished, and when I got home, I totally forgot about it. My parents cleaned out the car later, and my thought was they threw it away. Nope, they had placed it in the fridge thinking it was a half-full bottle of pop. Well, I only figured this out because my sister took a drink out of it and screamed. She said it must have been old and been in there forever because it tasted horrible. I was horrified, but I took it from her, fake smelled it, and threw it away, saying, "Yeah, that's disgusting." I have never told her, or anyone for that matter, what really happened. My little sister looked at me dead-eyed once and told me, "You have demons in you. You need to get them out," or something along those lines. I asked her what the frick she was talking about, and she just kind of went back to doing her thing. The girl was like 8, so I don't think she was trying to troll me. Overwrote my save file to start a new game. You son of a working woman, I will never forgive you. My little brother did the bottle glitch over my megaton hammer in Zelda Ocarina of Time. Replaced the hammer with a bottle. When I couldn't get past a certain section of the game due to having no hammer, I confronted him and asked why my hammer was a bottle. He swore he didn't know why, but I knew. I always knew. 20 years later, he brings it up and says that he did it on purpose because he was mad at me. Little siblings destroying your save games feels like a very 90s and early 2000s kids phenomenon. Perhaps someone can enlighten me if it's still very much a thing today? Seems less likely now we're out of the world of memory cards and most gaming systems have user profiles. So let me know in the comments. My favorite story is that I once went outside at 1 a.m. to watch a meteor shower and my brother's bedroom window faced the backyard. I don't know why he was up, he was maybe 12 at the time, and I hear him open the window and shout, "Who's out there?" I reply, "Just me," and he says, "Oh, I'll be right out." My brother gets out of bed at 1 in the morning, puts on some shoes and comes outside and says, "So, what are we doing?" The kid was forever down for late night adventures, apparently. I'm surprised that this resonated with so many people. This is my favorite story about my brother. He's a great kid now, 21, and I'm always proud of him and his adventurous spirit. My sister spoiled Dumbledore's death for me. She read The Half-Blood Prince in 24 hours, asked me if I wanted to know what happened. I said no, she told me anyway. I'm still mad. F you, Laura. My sister complaining bitterly about, "Why do you get a new car in your own apartment?" The answer was, "Because I work for a living," which apparently was a deeply offensive thing to say. Go figure. How old were the two of you at the time? Well, that's the sad part. I was 32 and she was 30. One of my sisters and I shared a room. One day she showed me her jewelry box, which was full of her petrified toilet paper wrapped poops. She then proceeded to show me how to do it, by laying toilet paper across the toilet seat, and then said I could save my poops too. Yeah, I took a pass on that one. My brother severely hurt his right leg in a work accident. His doctors tried to save his leg, but ultimately he ended up getting it amputated. So before he had it amputated, he got around on crutches, or on a day where he was in pain, a wheelchair. During this time, I moved back home to help him get around,
and do things he couldn't do. One thing he loves doing is building computers and video games. I would take him to electronic shops and follow him around as he bought games and stuff for his computer. We would go shopping like this more than once a week. I never minded because he's family and we get along really well. We got to know a lot of the staff at these shops. One time I was looking for some DVDs on my own, and one of the guys we'd gotten to know comes up and asks me if I needed help. And then he says, "You are a pretty cool girlfriend. You never seem bored or annoyed that your boyfriend spends so much time with his computer." I was so shocked I didn't reply right away, but then I made a super disgusted face and said, "He's my brother." Cue super awkward moment which doubled when my brother came by to tell me we could go and called me Boo, which is a nickname I've had my whole life that my brother gave me. It was so embarrassing. My mum was recently divorced and had a friend with a daughter my age. Let's call him Mark. The daughter and I were both 14 and got a lot of time together, so obviously there was some mutual experimenting. Well, it got really weird about 2 years later when my mum and Mark announced they were getting married and I was going to have a new stepsister. I came home from college for Thanksgiving, and the very first thing my brother says to me is, "If you think about it, 'Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned' is just a fancy way of saying, 'Sorry, Daddy, I've been bad.'" Then, during Thanksgiving dinner, he looked down, patted his stomach, and softly said, "Hey babe, ready for round 2? 'Cause I sure am." Then he got up and got another helping of turkey and mashed potatoes. Not the most WTF, but one we still like to joke about. My grandmother generally sends us all cards at Christmas, but a few years ago we all got our cards in the mail and things didn't quite match up. My oldest sister and I got the usual cards with the sweet, heartfelt messages from our grandma. We still call her the $100 grandchild when we're headed to family gatherings. So, are we all agreed that the sister took the money from the other cards to up her amount? Siblings are devious, and all it takes is a bit of steam to get inside the envelope. My brother came home after his first week of college, snuck in the house while we were sleeping, unpacked and went to bed, and woke up in the morning acting like he had never gone away to college. Refused to talk about it and acted like we were all crazy when we did. He was 10 years older than me, so I was only 8 at the time, but I remember my parents being very worried. He still won't admit or acknowledge that he ever went to college. Used to keep my green herb up in one of my ceiling tiles when I was a teen. Sister finds it, invites 15 friends over, and they cumulatively smoke an ounce of my stash. Get home to find my box with about a bowl left, and then I'm the one who gets in trouble for having Mary J in the house. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.